Mike's alive. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We are on YouTube now. We are at the Circuit of the Americas for the penultimate round of the oNiD International GT3 Championship. My name is Cammy Sturch, working the cameras. As always, is Mr. Dan Hyde of KDAN Broadcasting. And we've got a special guest in the studio joining us this evening, none other than Mr. Chaz Draycott.
Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. Hope you're all having a fantastic day and have had a wonderful weekend so far. What a great circuit we're at here this evening at COTA, Circuit of the Americas. A massive challenge. It's a great night to be here in the commentary box. Good to join you, Cammy, and of course Dan as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing some GT3 cars out on circuit tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, great to have you here. In practice, it looked like they've been racing in the dark. I think that's going to be the case for qualifying and the race as well. A real test of their abilities. Obviously, their usual sort of points of reference. Harder to see, so they'll have to be on their A game. The leaders are on 68 points apiece. It is Daniel Hearn and Jonathan Seville leading the way in the Pro class, with Miles Dixon on 44 points and Jeroen Jongen and Martin Thorpe 40 points apiece. In the AM class, it is Adam Gardner with 72 points and Christophe Papai and Mark Davenport both on 52 points apiece, and Mike Brown in third place with 49 points. And in the Champ class, it is Jonathan Earl with 50 points, just a point clear of Karolis Jurgelis, and in third place it is John Lloyd. But hopefully in a few moments we should be able to get some live pictures from qualifying, as the drivers should be finishing up with the drivers briefing now. So the championship, Chaz, is still all to play for in all three categories. And of course, there is one drop round, so only 5 races will stand for the points total.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to see that it is so close as well. In the Pro Championship, there is a little bit of a gap from the top 2 back to the remainder of the pack, but that's what makes it even more exciting, is the fact that they're still going to be able to battle each other and maybe take a bit more of a risk in giving up the odd point here and there and knowing they've got that slight buffer over the rest of the field. But it's interesting also to see that there's different cars amongst each of the championship fights. In the Champ class, we've got the Porsche 992 GT3Rs with one of the Ferrari 296s up there. There's also a Ferrari involved in actually each of the title fights, I must say. There's a Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo in second place in the AM class, tied with another Porsche, another Ferrari at the top of that. And then, of course, there's one of the Lamborghini Huracan Evo 2s and even a McLaren 720S at the overall top 3 standings in the championship. So a good mix of cars, at least, doing well in all 3 categories. And again, just showing you the balance of performance in the modern day of GT3 racing, always keeping it nice and level no matter who it is and what car they're in.
Yeah, of course, ACC had some new cars released a few months ago. We had the Ferrari 296, the Lamborghini Huracan Evo 2 and the Porsche 992. And whilst they've become some drivers, they've become firm favourites. It's great to see that some of the older cars that are firm, part of the old guard of ACC are still mixing it at the top. They've not been neglected, not been forgotten. The McLaren 720S GT3, the BMW M4, and we've even got, we have an AMR Vantage V12 out there as well.
Yeah, a fantastic machine, the V12 Vantage, a lovely bit of kit. I was lucky enough to see one in person at the Hungaroring last year as part of an event, and it was just awesome to hear that thing scream. It was about 3 or 4 seconds off the pace every single lap, but I don't think anybody, including the driver, cared whatsoever, because it meant that with it being so far off the pace, we were able to listen to it and obviously witness it every single time it went down the start-finish straight with no interference from any other cars around it. We're on board with Nathan Berry here in the Guaranteed to Choke Motorsport Lamborghini, the highest placed Lambo and the only one actually on our timing screen on the left-hand side as well. So clearly, Circuit of the Americas is a place for the Lamborghinis and the Raging Bulls, of course, to go hunting. It's looking good for him at the moment.
Yeah, of course. The drivers can't change cars once they've chosen their car for the season. Their car is what they use throughout all 6 rounds. And obviously, certain cars suit certain circuits, and this one is a circuit with lots of long straightaways, which really does play into the hands of the Lamborghini. I think the Porsches may find it a little bit tough. They're a little bit more handy, maybe around some of the smaller, twistier British circuits, so the Alton Park and the likes. But it'd still be interesting to see what the drivers can pull out of each of their machinery, because we've also got Reza there, who's running in the Nissan GTR, the only one in the field. It's not quite a favoured car, but they've been able to put out some surprise results with it recently.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's certain cars that match certain circuits very, very well, and usually the real niche ones are the bigger cars in the field. I mean, I always go on about the fact that BMW have had a history of taking big Grand Tourers rather than supercar-shaped machines like your Lamborghini Huracans and your McLarens and so on, and they'll turn them into really successful and really potent GT cars. I mean, you look at the M8 GTE car, for example, the likes of the BMW M6, which won at the Nürburgring with Row Racing in 2020. There's so many niche cars like that with these humongous bodies on them, but at certain circuits they work so well because they spread the weight over all four corners. They work really well in the wet as well, which is a key thing to have, because you need to have that versatility in your car, don't you? You need to know what its strengths and weaknesses are.
That's it. A lot of the older Porsche, of course, was it was very painful watching it go down the straights, as even if it had the slipstream from the car in front, it would lose time. It just had, it just needed more legs. And I think those sort of hardcore Porsche fans are so happy with the new 992 that it does have the legs down the straights, and they're able to keep up down the straights with the other cars. And yeah, we're just getting times on the board now. It's Jürgelis leading the way at the moment with a 2:06. Miles Dixon just over half a second back, but Jonathan Seville yet to put a time in, and he's usually a firm favourite to be at the sharp end of the pack. But you were talking about the various, BMW take out their Grand Tourers. I do miss the Z4 GT3.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a Facebook post a while ago about the glow up, let's call it, between the road car and the race car, and the sort of transformation of going from one to the next. And the way that the incredible transformation came about of the BMW Z4 blew a lot of people away. It was almost 1.5 times as wide. It had one of the best looking rear wings that I've ever seen on a GT3 car. Obviously the 4-litre V8 engine in the front made a hell of a racket as well. But it was just such a transformation from the road car that I don't think anybody saw it coming. As Jonathan Seville goes fastest in the number 97 Ferrari 296. It's a car that I'm still not sure whether I quite enjoy looking at it yet. I think the front of it looks awesome, but the rear end has got this really weird tubular shape to it. Almost like, it looks like it's always a convertible. Like it's a complete cut off of the cab once it gets, well, basically where the engine is. It's just I don't know, it's a very tubular shape, and I'm not quite sure if I'm on board with it yet, but it's obviously a potent machine. There's a lot of people using it in the real world as well as here in the sim, so it must be doing the business pretty well under the driver's control. Not quite sure if we've still got Cami there. I can't hear her for just a moment. We've got Jürgelis in second position at the moment, just under a second off the top spot. Hearn still in third, and then Vest actually doing a good job up there in fourth place at the moment. Of course, Vest running in the AM category. Ralph in the Porsche 992. There he is right now, actually, on your screens for Apex Driving School. One of the main differences... We've got you back now, Cami. Yes, I can hear you now. I was just going to say that one of the main differences from the Porsche 991 to the 992 GT3 cars is it looks like this one's been sat on by someone rather heavy, because it's really squashed down and it's got a lot wider and beefier. It used to be quite a narrow car in a way, with a lot more height to it. It was quite bulky in comparison, but it wasn't big like a Nissan GTR, and it wasn't tiny like the latest sort of Ferrari 488s. It wasn't anywhere in, well, it was sort of sat in the middle, essentially, but now it's got a bit more of a middle ground to it where it can spread its weight a little bit better, and obviously it's lower to the ground, it's a little bit better in a straight line, and they've just done a great job in refining not just the road car in recent times, because the 992 is a masterpiece, I think we'll all agree, but the race car as well, as a benefit from that development, has just got better and better on top of it as well.
As Jonathan Seville goes even faster. He gets in the 2-minute 4s now with a 2-minute 4.9. And yeah, I think when you look at the V12 Aston, it's a much smaller car. So there's a current, there is a trend of these cars getting bigger, and it happens on the road as well. The newest Clios are much bigger than sort of the original Clios that came out, and even Formula One cars, they are longer and wider than their counterparts even just a decade ago now. And I don't know if it's all because of it's easier to bring in the safety elements with a bigger car.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that, a wider car is going to hold the road better, as that's Brendan Rooney over the side of the road just returning to the pit lane. That's probably something you don't see so often in your real world experience of commentating, Jazz.
No, absolutely not. But of course, people want to take advantage of the fact that in the sim you can do that. You can literally pull over to one side and then just get straight back in the car with a fresh set of boots on it, fresh full fuel tank, or well, obviously a mostly drained fuel tank in these scenarios during qualifying. But you can just reset and get straight back out there in this wonderful oNiD Go for the Gap Racing Porsche 992, making his way now up to turn 1. A very difficult corner on this circuit because it's a blind apex. And obviously it's a much wider circuit on the way into the corner than it is on the way out. It's going to be a real pinch point this evening where we're obviously going to see a lot of moves taking place.
Yeah, no doubt some drivers' races are going to come to an end quickly at turn 1, lap 1. I think there's going to be a few people who try and throw it up the inside and a few people who end up being forced out wide.
Yeah, definitely. There's always going to be that one driver that wants to send it down the inside there, make it 5 wide and just think, yeah, I'm the one on the inside, everybody else has got to drive around me. It's not always the case, though. It's hard to know as well, if you are the car on the outside, just how many people are down there. Seville's gone even quicker now. He's 1.2 seconds clear at the top of the order. He's gone into the 2:04.8 now, so he takes it down another tenth of a second and continues to improve. We've got Rooney and then Hearn next up. Jürgelis is the highest placed in his category. And then Gardner in 6th position in the new number 787 Ferrari, which I noticed earlier has the old Renown Charge livery on it like a Mazda 787B. He's the head of his category at the moment. Here it is, actually, Adam Gardner. And once it gets into somewhere that's even slightly lit, we'll have a look at this, well, I'm going to call it blasphemy, as he runs the 787 livery on the Ferrari 296. But still, it's a good idea at the end of the day to mix up a different car and a different livery. And I know some people will be screaming murder at it, but still, it's good to see that it's going well in his control. 6th place overall at the moment. It's a very top performance by him so far and leading his class, which is important.
Well, what Remnant Racing do is they do the Indy style thing of having a teammate with a similar livery, but in slightly different colours.
Ah, right.
So there is another Remnant Racing car out there at the moment. There we go. Yeah, Mr. Henry Handy. And you'll see it's the same pattern, but dark blue and sort of a luminous yellow. When it's in daylight, it is anyway. As Henry Handy comes into the pits the old-fashioned way. And we were talking before we went live about more consequences in sim racing, weren't we? Maybe less of the return to garage and more of, if you're in the gravel, you've beached it, you're stuck. And do you think that would benefit sim racing, or bring sort of maybe more respect from real world drivers, or prepare sim racers for real world driving a bit more?
I reckon so, in a limited way. Yeah, I mean, I run a couple of sim racing leagues myself on a different platform, and I always ask that people do full in laps and full out laps. No mucking about and just pulling over as soon as you've done a lap. I don't know what it is that I don't like about it most, other than just it takes away a lot of the immersion. It just takes away a lot of the realism of how people view it. The way that sim racing broadcasting has come on and how good it looks these days, it's just awesome to see that we've got such realistic broadcasts that people get fooled by it. Some people will watch the graphics that you have here on a set of Corsa Competizione and they will think, wow, this is real racing. Where on earth in the world is this going on right now? And it often happens that you'll see someone in the comment section that gets fooled by it. But then all it'll take is one person doing a lap and thinking, right, next, pull over, and then disappear straight away. And that does take a lot of the immersion away from it, unfortunately. It's like when the cars, as we say, ghost through each other, where they don't make contact and they're in the pit lane and so on. There needs to be a level of realism for certain series and not for others, depending on what you want from it. Some people want to play them as if they are a game and, there's no major serious angle to look at it from. But others, like ourselves here this evening, want to put on a very realistic show and obviously have a pretty serious league about it all, and put together a really strong championship. So I think it depends on how you want things to be applied, I guess, in terms of not just the viewership, but drivers as well.
I mean, of course, we aim for realism, not only in the graphics, but a lot of these drivers have some of the most expensive and advanced simulator rigs out there, be it with their direct drive wheels and their load cell brake pedals. Some of them may even have a clutch pedal just for pulling away and getting into sort of first gear.
Yeah.
So to then to go from that paradigm of realism to I'm going to return to garage on the pit straight, it's a strange juxtaposition. Do you want it to be a game or do you want it to be a simulator?
Yeah.
But if the rule isn't there, as a driver and you're trying to get every advantage you can, you're not going to spend another minute and a half driving around the track for an in lap, are you? You're going to try and use that time to maximize your hot lapping time. And of course, there are drivers who use that in lap as good time to practice their pit entries, and no doubt we will. There's always a driver or two who come a cropper of the speed limit in the pit lane as they try and push it a bit too hard, but maybe after a board's been knocked over, they might just miss that breaking point when they need to slow down for the line and they get hit with a drive-through.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I say, it's just how it's applied and how people want to adhere to it and what elements everybody wants. And I think the respect for a championship wishing for a certain element to be adhered to is where it should lie, really. If there is a championship or an organiser that wants drivers to do in-laps and out-laps, whatever they want them to do, then if the drivers have the respect to do that, then it just brings it all together as one unit, as one collective effort. So we'll see how that goes, I suppose, in future, and whether people do start to maybe make more of an effect on it, or maybe take a bit more of a look at it in terms of how they apply themselves and obviously their drivers. But right now, we have the top four not so close together at the moment. It looks like a fantastic time from Seville has taken the challenge way further than some of them can manage. Here is Alex Shahabi, in the V12 Vantage GT3 car, screaming away with its naturally aspirated V12 engine and humongous rear wing, which is one of my favourite things about this car. It's a very little machine, but it's got the colossal rear wing on it, and obviously a fantastic soundtrack to go with it as well. And not doing too badly at the moment, actually, Cammy, right in the middle of the pack there in car number 8 in 15th position.
Yeah, he has put on some minor miracles in that V12 throughout the season. It's obviously got a sort of a top speed deficiency, and the balance of performance is not in its favour at all. And he has put on some stellar defensive drives. I remember a couple of rounds ago, Brendan Rooney in the 992 was coming up through the pack after he suffered a qualifying ban, and so he had to start from the back. And once he got up to about 16th, 15th position, he came up to Shahabi, and he went no further forward. He did get past Shahabi, but then Shahabi managed to get back past him, and it was great. It really, if you're practicing as a driver, it just brings out the best in you, and you're forced to have to be a defensive driver. And he was thrown in at the deep end, and Alex Shahabi is an immensely skilled driver anyway, so he pulls off minor miracles in that machine. As Brendan Rooney heading down the straight, he's still 1.2 seconds back from Jonathan Seville. So where for you does the line between sim racer and, as they all say, alien lie?
I'm not sure. It's interesting because there's always different visual aspects behind who's got pace and where. We've always got a different way of noticing certain ways that drivers either behave in traffic or how they hot lap on their own. And I think it's very hard to measure because we're always in different cars on different circuits, and with the accessibility of sim racing, obviously you can drive whatever you want, wherever you want in most cases. So I think it's hard to tell where that line is. I think there's a big grey area, to be honest, as Rooney just pushes it a little bit too hard there through the final couple of corners, pulls over to the side of the circuit, and will go again from the pit lane, I believe, as we look there at the BMW of Leighton Austin in third place at the moment. 4 different manufacturers in the top 4. But right now, Seville, well, certainly running the show, I'd say, at the front, Cammy. 1.2 seconds is I was going to say it's a very, very big gap, but I suppose with a longer lap round here that's over 2 minutes, it's maybe not as much of an exaggerated gap, I suppose. But still, it's a great job nonetheless, isn't it?
It really is. And Seville's one of those drivers where he doesn't get to the top and take it easy and say, right, I'm going to have a cup of tea, I'm going to relax, just going to prep myself for the race. He will keep pounding in those laps, and he will not rest idly there. He will not take that for granted, and he'll keep working away and eking out a bigger and bigger gap to the one next to him on the front row. So even when we've got 1 minute to go, I promise you, he'll be out on the circuit putting in another hot lap, just seeing where he can find improvements. And there's, we've talked before, Dan and I have talked before about the possibility of Seville moving essentially to the big leagues in bigger sim racing competitions against the likes of James Baldwin. But we just think, does he want to be a big fish in a smaller pond or a small fish in a big pond? And at the moment, Seville, he does run this show in terms of on-track performance. As Alex Jahabi goes very wide there. That was a moment there, wasn't it? I think he invalidated his lap though. He certainly went over the sausage curbs, which again I would be happy to see those removed, as it seems like they could be removed in the real world as well, couldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think he not only invalidated the lap time, I think he invalidated the entire bottom of the car as well, to be fair. He absolutely slapped it against the surface, and that poor Aston Martin, while sounding fantastic over the curbs, certainly will not be at its best for the rest of the lap, that's safe to say. Here's Colin Cameron in the Extra Life Evil Nature Ferrari, making his way round. Mark Davenport, car 22, position 22 at the moment. His best time is a 2:07.9. His last was only about a tenth of a second off that, so he's still almost at his best pace, but just not able to improve at this moment in time, as he's 3 seconds off the top spot. Only about a second, though, off the top 10 as well, so it does show you that it's very close through the field. I mean, you can see it for yourselves on the left-hand side of the shot there with the timing tower we've got. There's only mere hundredths of a second between every driver in this pack, to be fair. As Mark Davenport has suddenly just moved up a spot in the order, so I'm not sure if someone's lost a lap time or whether somebody's disconnected and left the server, but he's gone up and then gone back down again, so clearly someone moving around within the order there, Cammy. But it's not long left now, 9 minutes of this session to go, and the drivers really have to start dialing it up for these final flying laps.
Yeah, Davenport, easy come, easy go when it came to that 21st position, but coming up in about, say, 10-15 minutes, it will be the main feature race, an hour and 15 minutes. And of course, some of these drivers might not be hot lappers, they might be struggling to put a lap together, but some of them do come into their own in the race. They can be very consistent, and they know there'll be drivers around them who will pick up the drive-through penalty, who might get a bit of ire from the stewards after the race, and they'll be able to just slowly pick away and sort of pick up positions just by having a quiet, peaceful race on their own and keeping out of trouble, which is I think people don't value, the benefits of just keeping your nose clean, regardless whether you go on the attack or not.
Yeah, you've got to have a clean race under your own circumstances. You've just got to play the game and just think about the fact that it's a long race. I've always seen that there's always the drivers that will just send it straight off the bat, and they will not hang back whatsoever in a long race. Even though they know it's an hour and 15 minutes, they'll behave like it's a 3-lap sprint straight as soon as the lights go out. And you'll see those drivers imminently. That's the thing. You'll notice who they are straight away. Some of them say that it's an advantage to be able to push so hard at the beginning of a race and try and make the moves early on while the field is still together. It may be a valid strategy, but some of them sometimes just it reeks of overconfidence with some drivers, and you need to really play your cards right and be careful in the opening stages. So it's going to be an exciting time to see it. An hour and 15 minutes as well is not a short amount of time, and like you say, there are certain people that can help look after the tyres, certain people that will get themselves in a situation where maybe they can slipstream off some of the cars in front, save a bit of fuel, maybe not enough to completely negate a pit stop, but obviously it just helps if they've got a shorter pit stop for later on in the race if it comes around. So yeah, it's going to be exciting to see who has the different elements and the different processes in mind ready to take on a race like this. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see who can do that and who cannot, because obviously it's a new grid to me as well, so it's a new bunch of drivers, so it's like a clean slate from where I stand, and I'm excited for every little element of it.
I see you're coming into it very unbiased. I'm looking at some of these drivers like a school teacher looks at her class and goes, "Yeah, I know which one of these I have to keep an eye on."
Yeah.
But when it comes to the pit stops, I'll let you know, let everyone listening know, there are 2 mandatory pit stops tonight. Have to be performed within the pit window. They do not have to change tyres, but there is mandatory refueling. So whether drivers want to start the race with a very light load and try and sort of pick up an advantage, or whether they want to just take all the fuel they need and then do a quick splash and dash in the pits, it is completely up to them. So there is an element of strategy that comes into it, but they have to take 2 pit stops, and if they can keep it to 2, that would be ideal. We don't want, you don't want to see any drivers having to pit early to repair damage.
Yes, absolutely. You want to make sure that you are on track at full pace for as long as possible, especially with 2 pit stops on the board for most drivers as well. So, yeah, you need to make sure that you minimise any stationary time in the pit lane. 5.5 minutes left to go. We look here at Leighton Austin in the number 23 BMW M4 GT3. Another big car from BMW that does the job. And he goes up into 3rd place actually now. So it's still the top 4 in different Ford manufacturers, of course. We've got the Ferrari ahead of the McLaren, then the BMW and the Porsche. The highest placed Lamborghini in the field is down in 9th position at the moment, car number 96. And then even lower than that, we have Mercedes and Audis languishing a bit further down, even Aston Martin's in the order. So it seems like, in terms of the McLarens, it's Hearn that is the only one to make it work up there at the moment. But a number of Ferraris and Porsches in the pack, obviously being some of the newer cars, they may be quite favourable to be in at the moment. But right now, we look at Rooney just coming through the final couple of corners. Looking like he's pushing a bit more here, Cammy, just to try and get those final laps in at the end of the session.
Yeah, he just comes out the final corner, foot down. He's coming across the start-finish line now. He moves up into 3rd place. It is an improvement, however minor it is, but it doesn't see him onto the front row. That is still championship leaders locking that one out, Seville and Hearn. And here is Jonathan Seville at the moment working his way through the S's, and the Ferrari, in my experience when I tried it, it is a very nicely balanced car. The Porsche, with the engine at the back, it does have a heavy rear end and it can sort of swing out on you, sort of almost like a pendulum. Whereas the Ferrari did seem a little bit more balanced, and it's working very well for Seville. And obviously it's working for Gardner as well in the Ferrari, who is leading the AM class at the moment, 6th overall. An incredible performance by him, but he's hotly pursued by Ralph Vest, who is in 7th in the Porsche. And they are both, look how many pro drivers they are sitting ahead of on the grid at the moment.
Yeah, they're doing a great job as well. It's always a real confidence booster as a driver when you do end up in one of the lower 2 classes within a field, but you can still out-qualify and outpace some of those in the classes above you, on paper at least. So like I say, it's all about having that confidence going into a race like this, knowing as well that you can be ahead of them for quite a long time. But what you're saying there about the Ferrari is interesting to hear, because one of the key elements of a mid-engined car, like your Ferraris and your Lamborghinis and your McLarens even, is the fact that if you do push them too hard a lot of the time, the weight being just slightly over the rear axle can be a massive pain in the backside, quite literally, because it will just swing around. And that pendulum effect is very, very true. Porsche's obviously known a little bit more for that in the past because of the fact that the engine is so much further back. But they've made it a lot more mid-engined in recent iterations. The engine is gradually working its way forward in Porsches. In probably 20 years, the engine will be in the front like a Corvette. Or like a Corvette should be, I should say, as the most recent one has the engine in the middle. But still, it's just part of the way that even the road cars work as well. I mean, so much development goes into the road cars because they know now that it's very likely they'll make GT cars of them. It's quite an intriguing thing to see how well these manufacturers really do take on the fact that they know they'll go racing. They really do adopt it, don't they, as part of the development for good road cars.
They do, and it just brings to mind the story that James Baldwin spoke of. Obviously, he's world's fastest gamer for a time, and he was missing his apexes slightly. I say he wasn't missing his apexes. He wasn't using much curb, and the team brought him up on that. Why aren't you using the curb? And it dawned on him. The McLaren, the 720S GT3 in Assetto Corsa Competizione, doesn't like the curbs. It gets very skittish. It's not like a big Bentley where it just sort of sails over them. The McLaren is difficult to handle over bumps and you can lose control of it. And he had taken that habit into the real world. But apparently in the real world, the 720S GT3, you can run it over the curbs fine. You can be very aggressive with the curbs. But it's amazing that sort of how the cars, they're obviously make the cars as realistic as they can, and the studios extensively test these cars to get the physics just right. But I thought it was quite amazing that he brought over that habit into the real world, and so it just opened up the question: how many other cars with their idiosyncrasies are just a little bit different to their real world counterparts? You know, because you said about the newer Porsches, they're not quite as tail happy as they used to be, and they've brought the engine forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But in ACC, I still think it's got a heavy rear end compared to some of the other mid-engine cars.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the key factors of Porsches is that because the engine's all the way over the back end, you know, they have to make the front very pointy on them, and that's what makes them even more oversteery, is that aerodynamically they put so much in the front of the car, and obviously want to work on getting that engine and the weight down hard on the floor with a humongous rear wing and diffuser and all sorts so they can get the traction. It becomes a very difficult car to balance in a way. The road cars are obviously considered some of the finest drivers' cars in the world, so to speak. But the GT cars, obviously, very hard to get right sometimes. Here's Jürgelis across the line, doing a great job in quali so far. A long way ahead of his nearest competitor, Shepard, in car 33, down in 16th place. And then Blomqvist as well, car number 6, who we look at here. Elvin just on the initial parts of his final lap of the session, which is now at an end. We've got just under 3 minutes for drivers to complete their laps as Elvin overdoes it, and that's going to be the end of that. And in typical sim racing fashion, throws the car off the road with a little bit of frustration there, Cammy.
Yeah, I'll see. Gets just hit the escape button and you return to the pits, and there's no big bill if you smack the car into the barrier. Jon Jongen at the moment, QRT Esports. I'm noticing, actually, you wouldn't have noticed, but I might have to confirm this with Dan. I think a few drivers have changed teams recently. I think Jon Jongen, I'm more associating him with the Dutch Endurance team, and Leighton Austin, I think he was with, I'm trying to think if it was Connexus Motorsports or QRT, Dan, and now Leighton Austin is with Pulse Simsport.
Yeah, he was with QRT, now he's Pulse. He announced it yesterday or the day before.
So we've got, like the F1 driver, like Red Bull, just teams kicking drivers out or moving drivers around halfway through a season. As I think, is that every driver? No, we've still got somebody out there.
Yeah,
we've still got Jongen, and we've still got Zach Silver. And Silver's third in class at the moment. Here's Aidan Chapman, 25th, rounding the last corner in his... Oh, he's clipped the curb!
No.
What a painful moment to lose it. I mean, we don't know if he was... up on his lap. He obviously felt it was worth finishing the lap until he reached that corner, but that brings qualifying to an end.
Absolutely. So we'll be getting the race underway in just a couple of minutes' time, of course. We will now have the drivers all lined up on said grid, and they'll be getting final setup tweaks ready to go, because this is going to feel like quite a long race around here at Circuit of the Americas at night as well. It's a difficult circuit in the daytime, never mind at night. It's not the most lit circuit in the world either, actually, so a lot of these apexes are going to be very hard to hit, I reckon.
Yes, they are. We'll take you through the grid. If you're just joining us, it is Jonathan Seville on pole for Racing for I Flatlined, sorry, Pulse. So that news is out that he's left Pulse Simsport. Daniel Hearn is joining him on the front row. Then it is Brendan Rooney alongside Pulse Simsport's Leighton Austin, their new recruit. Jürgelis leads the way in 5th place for the silver class, alongside Adam Gardner leading the AM class, 6th place overall. 7th is Jeroen Jongen alongside Ralph Vest in the AM class. 9th is Stefuk, and 10th, rounding out the top 10, is Henry Handy for Remnant Racing. Then it is Jelinek alongside Thorpe, Silver alongside Brown, Shepard, Hall, Shahabi, Blomqvist, John Cheel, Murphy, Cameron, Reza in his GTR, Papai, Davenport, Chatburn, Scrub, Berry, Knowles, Sherlock, Holman is 30th, ML, Alex Parkin, Tuck Gibson and Miles Dixon. A couple of drivers there with qualifying bans, so they've had to start from the back of the pack. And I just had to race through those names quickly, and I've timed it pretty well. 10 seconds to go, and we'll be off on the formation lap. And somebody in the chat has said, yes, Chaz, you never mentioned this.
I never mentioned what, sorry.
I don't know what they're referring to. Maybe they're referring to the fact you didn't tell them that you were commentating this evening.
If it starts with yes, Chaz, I mean, I've not got the chat open. It's probably Mark Fletcher, isn't it?
Ryan Davies.
Oh, Ryan Davis. Okay. Sorry, Ryan. I shouldn't have assumed that you were Mark. Yes, I'm helping Dan out for this evening and joining Cammy in the commentary box. And it's obviously always good to jump back on a set of Corsa Competizione and cover some GT3 racing. It's not a category that I've covered for quite a while now, actually. Recently, my experience with the set of Corsa Competizione has been on the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Esports Championship in their gorgeous Huracan Super Trofeo Evo 2s. And it's been a lot of fun there and getting used to different sims. It's not a sim that I commentate on often, actually. So it's good to be back and good to join you guys once again and obviously work with everyone here.
Yeah, because you commentate a little bit more on iRacing on I know you do the Formula 1 series.
Sorry, say again. I lost you for just a moment there, Cameron.
Oh, my terrific internet. I know you're usually commentating on iRacing and on the Formula 1 series.
Yes, indeed. Hosting the CDM Formula 1 World Championship over on iRacing using the little rotary-engined Japanese Pro Mazda open-wheeler, but in classic 1990s Formula 1 liveries where we just basically take the mick out of the 1997 and 1998 seasons. But yeah, it's a lot of fun doing that, and trying to broadcast and commentate simultaneously while running a championship can be quite strenuous, but I do it for the love of it. I absolutely adore doing what I do.
And those of you watching who may not be so familiar with Chaz Draycott, Chaz, sort of tell us about the series you commentate, because you commentate on real life racing, don't you?
Yes, I was very lucky actually during 2020 to be one of the people that sort of benefited from the COVID pandemic, as everybody from the real world of racing came over to do things virtually. I was acquainted with a number of real world commentators that I could speak with and tell them about my ambitions to move into real world motorsport, and now I fly around Europe shouting at race cars. For the last couple of years, I've covered the Clio Cup Europe Championship for Renault. Unfortunately, not on that series this year after moving away from it. But I cover the FIA Goodyear European Truck Racing Championship, which is a very niche thing in itself, but I'm very well looked after over there, and it's a great corner of motorsport. If you've never watched truck racing before, whether it be the British Truck Racing Championship and, well, even the European Truck Racing Championship as well, there's a great French series too. I would implore you to just give them a go and just see how they look, because, I mean, away from the beautiful cars that we have on our screens right now in GT3 racing, the sights and sounds of GT3 racing will never get boring and never get old. Truck racing is a different kettle of fish. You're talking 5.3 ton machines, 1200 horsepower, 6,000 newton meters of torque. Yes, really. And they do 20 to 100 miles an hour because, let's face it, 0 to 60 times in a truck aren't anything to boast about. 20 to 100 miles an hour, as fast as a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And that is my bread and butter at the moment, is truck racing. And I cover a number of other club meetings around the UK as well. I absolutely love it. It's good fun.
Have you commentated on kart racing as well? I know that's way in for a lot of commentators.
I don't. Karting hasn't always interested me as much. I've done a bit here and there for the wonderful people at Alpha Live, covering a couple of Wilton Mill events, and my actual first real world event was the Buckmore Park 24 Hours with Anthony Jordan in 2019, and it's certainly good fun to catch up with Anthony every so often and see how we've both come on since that event back in 2019. We're just about to get going though, so I'll stop talking about myself and we'll get this underway, shall we, Cammy?
We shall, and you say Buckmore Park, my local, it's a favourite of mine. As the cars round the last corner now, it's of course a rolling start. They'll have the red light in front of them waiting for the green. They've got to keep to the speed limit of 70 kilometres per hour. If they go over that, they will be hit with drive-through penalty. There is the man with the flag. We're just waiting for the green flag to drop. It is a test of reaction times. Who's going to get their foot down the quickest and also be in the right gear? There it is. Green flag's away. Green light is on as the field blasts through the straight, up the hill towards the first corner. Are we going to see any late lunges? Looks like lots of people keeping it tight and clean. Oh, and that is getting messy in the mid-pack there. I saw one driver on the grass.
Yeah, there was one of the Porsches as well, got really held up in the middle of the circuit, had to just slam on the brakes there and try and avoid any other potential issues coming their way. As we look at now the initial start, that's the number 13 machine. Just trying to hold position at least.
Yeah, we've got Zach Silver in the black and yellow purple Audi there.
Oh,
a little bit of door banging. And the replays come to an end before the action. So Dan's just going to wind the video back and try and get us a replay that covers the moment in question. Watching Ollie Knowles in the middle of your picture there. The black, white and gold 911.
Oh, goodness me. There was already a Porsche around before they got to the corner, actually, there, Cammy. I'm not quite sure which one that was. Like I say, all these drivers new to me and new liveries to learn for this evening. But yeah, there was already a black and red Porsche completely around in the middle of the road before they even got there.
Yeah, we've got Henry Handy in the blue and yellow Ferrari there, just trying to watch. It's tricky because you're looking at one point and then it goes it goes wrong in another point. You sort of got to watch it back about 5 times because everything's kicking off all at once in different places. As I think Brendan Rooney round the outside there, taking that 3rd place. Was that from Leighton Ossett? No, he's fending off. He's fending off your own Jongen.
Yeah, Jongen was just trying to put one down the inside, and to be fair, it was really respectful stuff because he was making sure that he didn't run wide on the exit and run into the side of Rooney, so he got on the brakes and tucked it tightly to the inside. He's forcing Rooney to defend again, though, and the thing is right now, they don't want to be doing this initially at the very start of the race. They want to just try and sit behind the cars in front, stick with them for now, and then get in a rhythm and see if they can break away from the cars behind, because you want to have that buffer, but absolutely not at the moment. Your own Jongen is just throwing himself at Rooney in front, although he nearly gets collected by the Ferrari / Mazda behind of Gardner. Car 787 is now directly in front of his class rival, the number 3 machine of Vest. And certainly there's a battle developing there between those two. There's not so much a battle in the other class, though, with car 24, Jurgelis leading the way. Blomqvist, his next class rival, is a good 6 places back. But right now, Seville leading the way by 2 seconds. A great opening couple of laps for him.
Yeah, Gardner, he's putting that pressure on Jeroen Jongen, even though they are in very different classes. So it will make no difference to their points tally at the end of the evening, you know, which position those two are in compared to each other. So, you know, does Gardner go on the attack, as is Rooney losing that position? I think Jongen has planted it nicely up the inside. Rooney doesn't have a response. He's just going to have to get back into the slipstream and try and take that back. So Jongen up into 5th place, and these two do have a history. They are rivals. They've had a bit of a... They've kept it generally respectful, but in the last laps of races, they've been known to get doors banging as Rooney sends it up the inside. He's taking that back, and the more they fight, the more they're starting to lose touch with Leighton Austin up ahead as Jongen goes back through. So the position is changing at every corner, Chaz.
Yeah, fantastic battling. Very, very close indeed. We've even got Dan with a sharp inhale of breath as well, as he hopes that they don't make contact on the way in. We've got the three Porsches here with the Ferrari sandwiched in the middle of them. But still great fighting. But you're absolutely right, Cammy. They don't want to be fighting too hard like this early on in the race, because all they're doing is letting Hearn and Austin disappear off up the road. And they're not going to give themselves an opportunity at further progressing into a podium position come the end of the race. You have to think bigger picture in races like this. I said earlier, didn't I, that it's not a 3-lap sprint. They don't need to treat it as such. They need to just take their time, get into a rhythm, and just get into a situation where the car feels good underneath you. You've got the confidence in it. You've got the confidence in the people around you on the circuit as well. And that helps you push as the race goes on then and sit together on the circuit. You know, you have to just play your cards right. They know there's going to be pit stops shaking it up as well. So I think it just takes a little bit more of a look in the mirror from some of these drivers. You know, they'll say, oh, so-and-so was sending it on me, or so-and-so wanted to try and defend or attack. And you just need to think, right, put yourself in that situation or take yourself away from it. You know, you are the one that's mainly in control of what your car is doing and where you put said car. So I'm excited to see who can keep their nerve in these situations. But right now at the front, Jonathan Seville, well, he's definitely not flatlining. He's just disappearing up the road.
And for a little bit of context, Jeroen Jongen 3rd in the championship at the moment with 40 points. Rooney in 6th place with 17 points. As it is getting very close back here. This is the battle for 14th place. Oh, Henry Handy, and that is... I'm just that's Blomqvist. Oh, no!
Oh, no. I think
And
that was the Ferrari. Was that? Yeah, it was Blomqvist, wasn't it? Car number 6.
And was that Jelinek? I'm trying to see if that's Jelinek who's been taken out of the picture there. And the cars, they're still facing the wrong way. That Alex Shahabi in the V12, no. And he's keeping the brakes on. That is the right thing to do. Try and facilitate a safe rejoin. And get the car facing about face. Yeah. So very unfortunate for those two getting caught up in what looked like a battle behind them and somebody just missed their braking point.
Yeah, Blomqvist was just a little bit over-exuberant on his way there. Gibson's had an issue as well, going way, way off the circuit. But yeah, unfortunately, Blomqvist, for one, flicked the car really hard to the left under braking to go into the inside line, nearly took out the car to his left, and then just went straight on into the corner and smacked into the back of the Mercedes. It was a little bit careless, to say the least. He's managed to get away with it, though, as well, which will be extra frustrating for the drivers around him to have witnessed, because when you see somebody doing something like that, you just hope that, obviously, they get caught up in it as well, and karma bites him in the backside. But it was the V12 Aston Martin that was on the left-hand side, so here he goes. All of a sudden, he's going to flick the car to the left very hard there, nearly hits the Aston, and it's just way too late. He was focused on diving down the inside and not focused on the corner itself, and goes straight into the side of the Mercedes. And to be honest, it's not really a car that I'd like to hit, that Mercedes. It's like crashing into the side of a warehouse, isn't it?
I think he imagined this sort of dynamic, this will look great on television sort of moment where I'll up-brake him hard and go deep into the corner. And as soon as he'd swung out left and got on the brakes, he'd realised, yeah, we're on the opening laps, there's other cars there. And then all he's trying to do is avoid them, but he can't. They're nose to tail with each other, and he's going to hit one of them, and then it was a case of you have to pick which one you're going to hit, and unfortunately for Jelinek, it was him. So we've got drivers coming into the pits now, having to change up their strategies, and Petr Jelinek off again. I think he's carrying damage. I think he's still just trying to, he's obviously carrying around damage and probably got that rear splitter will be producing no downforce at the back there, and he's just trying to get round and get it back to the pit lane.
Yeah, the rear end of that car will feel absolutely horrible now. It'll be the left rear as well, and every time he leans on that, the car's just going to want to break away from him and go in the opposite direction. Here's Ralph Vest, right behind Gardner at the moment for the lead of their class. So there's a decent battle going on here, and they're right near the sharp end of the order as well, after a couple of cars have made way for them, so to speak. Jürgelis behind them in 7th place. He's a good couple of car lengths back now, nearly 6 seconds actually as well, so forget car lengths, you may as well measure it in postcodes. But right now, Vest is just going to be focusing on what's in front of him, and it is that 787 Ferrari. And right now, he's just got to keep his head in the game and not push too hard. This is the thing. A lot of drivers, Cammy, they find it a lot easier to chase when there's a physical target in front of them. They can see the visual difference between how quickly they're going compared to the car in front, like that there. In those last 2 corners, he's really closed up. When you're just chasing numbers, it's a lot harder to picture it in your mind and a lot harder to stay motivated to keep chasing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's much more abstract, and what the drivers need is... I had to stop there. I thought Steffiuk was going to go into the back of Silver there. They need a rabbit to chase. The dog needs a rabbit to chase. And Ralph Vest is 6th in the AM Championship at the moment, whereas Adam Gardner is leading it. So I'm wondering if Ralph Vest is, he's happy. He could be happy to sit in 2nd, knowing he's picking up valuable points that will see him shoot up the order from 6th place in the standings. And Adam Gardner, there's no pressure for him either. He can drop to 2nd, and he'll still be leading the AM Championship by a country mile. He is 20 points clear of Christophe Papai. And Christophe Papai is not in a position at the moment to challenge him. I'm not sure where he is. He's further back down. So his nearest championship rival is nowhere. And Davenport, who's tied on points with Papai, is down in 21st. So Adam Gardner is going to have if he can keep it, a very peaceful race this evening, because Ralph Vest is not going to really want to fight with him. He needs those points as much as Gardner does.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great position to be in, at least. But at the same time, these are racing drivers. You try and tell them to hang back and slow down. He's just got to score as many points as he can here, because you never know when the points may swing in someone else's favour in the latest part of the season, as was that Vest. Around it was. Ralph Vest completely backwards in the Porsche, facing the wrong way. And, well, I'm not sure whether there would have been contact here, whether he's overdone it trying to make an overtaking manoeuvre. Well, there was a Lamborghini right behind him, and hopefully there was not contact between the two of them here. Is he just going to overdo it into the left-hander? Nope, the Lambo is going to drill the Porsche.
Oh.
And that was the number 114 car that was involved there, and that's a real shame. Was that car not further down the order, actually, Cammy? Was that car not a lap down?
It was, yeah. On the matrix display on the windscreen, it was showing 33rd position. So was that Berry?
Yeah, it was. Nathan Berry.
So to have a car a lap down make contact with you, and just after, is that commentator's curse? We were just speaking the praise of Vest, running it in second place, the valuable points for him, and suddenly he's thinking, I must have a target painted on my back.
Well, it suddenly proves that Vest isn't bulletproof, doesn't it, I suppose, if that happens.
Oh.
But he's going to be into the pits now to make sure that he gets himself maybe a bit more calm and, of course, just takes a moment out of the race, and then we'll jump back in and hopefully continue. I hope that's not him retiring from the race as well, because obviously the phrase rage quit gets thrown around a lot. But the thing is with sim racing, when you take it as seriously as a lot of the drivers do within a competition like this, the emotion is so real, and you can get so wound up. You just think, right, that's it, I'm calling it a day, and that is that. And Vest is now dropping down the order naturally for being in the pit lane, but hopefully we'll be back out on the circuit again in that gorgeous metallic number 3 Porsche. We look here at Rainer Ressar in the cute and round Nippon Steel Racing Nissan GTR. You can just about see behind it, as it's literally like a Japanese tower block, that there is a Ferrari there with Chatburn behind him in car number 18. But Rainer Ressar doing everything right at the moment, just outside of the top 10 in the Nissan GTR. It's obviously very subtle in this bright pink colour scheme, but chasing down now Shepard in the Mercedes.
Yeah, no, Nissan GTR, it is a very fast car in a straight line. I know in the last round, Rooney had a hard time getting past Ressar because at Suzuka, Ressar could just sit it on the apex in the corners, and Rooney could find no way round, and then Ressar could just put his foot down, pull away on the straights. So whilst the GTR might not have I don't know if it's been nerfed in terms of the BOP updates. It's certainly not the favourite of most drivers, but Ressar has been making it work, and is going very well at the moment, 3rd in class. But Aidan Chatburn is obviously going to want a step up onto that podium.
I think one of the key things about the Nissan GTR is because it's one of these bigger cars like the Bentley or even the Lexus RCF GT3, which in my eyes is one of the greatest looking GT3 cars ever made. They have this real niche window where they work at certain circuits, they work in certain conditions, especially in the wet weather as well, really spreading the weight well across the 4 corners of the car, and maintaining a very tasty contact patch on all 4 tyres. But the GTR might not be matched very well to certain parts of this circuit here, but maybe some of the high-speed corners. It's a very stable car most of the time, from what I've experienced in the past of driving it anyway. So coming through somewhere like the S's here would feel really good in the GTR, even if it's not the pointiest thing at the front end. You can see actually Shepard in the Mercedes in front having a real wobble, and Blomqvist has been given a drive-through penalty. Hardly surprising, I have to say, but no disrespect to Blomqvist. He was only trying to race hard and try and get a send done down the inside, but it was just that little bit of carelessness. At the end of the day, you can't argue with the fact that it has affected another driver's race, as right now we see Jeroen Jongen apparently showing his 2nd place. Yes, he's ahead of the McLaren now of Hearn, so he's caught up with Hearn and managed to get past him already. That's gone under the radar.
Although Hearn's not letting it lie. Oh, it looked like he was about to send it up the inside, but we've got a replay of Jongen's move. And it was quite a last-minute lunge. I mean, brilliantly executed. Very cleanly executed as well. And was Hearn flashing the lights there? Yeah,
maybe feeling like he had no option other than to potentially get out of the way of the Porsche. But at the end of the day, I don't think he did anything necessarily wrong. It was just a racing manoeuvre at the end of the day. Maybe just trying to put him off as they continue on further down the road. We'll have to wait and see whether that translates to any more body language from the McLaren. It's nice to see the 720S GT3 Evo up there. Obviously, this is one of the cars with the Evo package on it, not just the standard initial iteration of the McLaren 720S. There's barely any visual difference between them, and to be honest, in most championships now that use the McLaren 720S or have teams that run it, they will have what they call the Evo package. So there's just a slight few different parts aerodynamically that they can buy to bolt on to their McLaren 720S anyway. Here's another replay from further down the order. A little bit of shenanigans going on here potentially. Is that Blomqvist again in the Ferrari? I think it is.
Got past Mike Brown in the white Porsche.
Got past Mike Brown in the white Porsche, being told by Dan. Thank you very much, mate. And it was quite another big move down the inside there, Cammy. Clearly people are trying to now get a bit more sendy as this race develops.
Yeah, I think Blomqvist is just trying to take away some of the pain because he's going to have to say, oh, we've got a spinner in the background there. That's was that Brown who's, no, it couldn't be, was that Ollie Knowles who spun it in the background? But Blomqvist does have that drive-through penalty to serve, so anything he can do to alleviate the pain that's going to be had from that, he can do. And that Mercedes up ahead, it really isn't enjoying these S's. The big heavy engine in the front, it is a little bit understeery, and Ressar, as you say, in that nice big stable GTR, is able to make gains through the S's here.
Yeah, the long nose on the front end of the Mercedes certainly doesn't make it easy when it comes to a lot of weight transfer. You know, you have to make the front end of the car really pointy to drag that big, hefty 6.3 litre V8 lump around from corner to corner. And to be honest, the drivers can very easily overdo that as well, make it a little bit too oversteery, because then when there's barely any weight over the rear, obviously there's nothing going to be happening in terms of any correction, so it's going to be tough to keep the car doing what you want it to. Rainer Ressar now finds themselves in 10th place inside the top 10 in the Nissan GTR. We do have a very good spread of manufacturers in said top 10. But it's just interesting. I mean, it's something we've not really touched on much at the moment, Cammy, is the fact that we're still racing at night here at Circuit of the Americas. It's not something I've ever covered before, as it's going to continue to get darker and darker. It's not actually going into daylight here, so it's not like a morning session or anything like that where the sun will rise. As there was a bit more of a moment there, actually. The Ferrari has gone very, very wide, and then the Mercedes now makes a move, and, well, it's not much of a move. Doesn't have to be done, really, there, Cammy, as suddenly the positions all switch around again.
Yeah, I think Blomqvist, Jan was just saying in our ear, Blomqvist let Shepard go through there. I think that was as Blomqvist comes in now to serve that drive-through penalty. Yeah, I think you can only go for 3 laps, and if you don't serve that drive-through penalty, you will be disqualified. So Blomqvist has to come in now. Gets on the speed limiter. The hazards come on. But he's pulling over. This is a drive-through penalty. So he should just be driving through the pit lane. I think he's just realised that. He can't actually serve a pit stop because it won't register as serving the penalty. And then he'd be disqualified. So I think he's just forgotten what he had to do there. As we join Adam Gardner running up in 5th place, and we're going to check the gap. We'll have to check back on the gap between Seville and Jongen, because Jongen has never won a race in the oNiD GT3 Championship Series in all the forms that our Top Split GT3 race has, series have taken. Jongen has never won a race, but has come from being a strong midfielder to suddenly a driver that can fight for podiums, and this is the best chance he's had of going for a win. But that gap does seem to be growing. It's gone from 12.7 to 13.3 seconds now. So Seville very much in control of this race and just having to handle a little bit of traffic. But it looks light around him. He's got one car that he's just overtaken and one car just in front. But other than that, he looks like he's got an open road. And as I said, in control of this race as we jump back to Matt Holman of Hoonigan Race Division. And you see he's
16 positions.
He's up 16 positions from the start of this race, so he's taken advantage of the chaos, and it's just one of those drivers, I said, you just keep your nose clean whilst others fall away, and of course he's taken advantage of those who have pitted. Brown has pitted, Steffhook has pitted, Silver, Handy, Hall and Vest. And of course, you'll see the little orange tab has a 2 or a 1, and when the drivers have completed both of their pit stops, the little tab will turn green. As Chatburn trying to close up on Ressar now.
Yeah, it's great. Just to come back to what you mentioned a moment ago about drivers going from sort of midfield runners to then getting quicker and quicker and ended up at the front of the pack. It's always wonderful to see when you get that driver development in a championship. People come into it with a different level of experience or even just as a new driver in general, and then you see them getting quicker and quicker. You see them dealing with different scenarios over the course of a race evening, getting that pressure out of the way when it comes to a final fast lap in qualifying, or overcoming nerves at the start of a race, being able to handle multiple cars around them at once and be able to keep their head and defend. And then even later on in the race when fatigue sets in, because even in an hour and 15 it's still very mentally taxing is racing at this sort of level. So the drivers have a lot to think about, and there's a lot of different parts of the race, moving parts that you have to fine tune as a competitor, don't you?
Yeah, what these drivers, I think what people don't, what they might take for granted. It's not just a game. This is physically demanding. And of course,
Yeah.
I mean, how hot is it for you? Because it's about, I think they said it got to about 30 Celsius today in the UK.
Well, actually, I must admit right now it's absolutely caning it down here in the UK at the moment. Well, my part of the UK at the moment, anyway, up north, it's leathering it down, and I quite welcome it because it has been very hot today. But there is a bit of a move going on here as Chatburn and the Nissan very side by side. You don't need to drive into each other in a straight line, though. You gain nothing from squeezing the car next to you down the straight. You often see a lot of people moving around on the straights almost to try and fake out the other car, and it's just not necessary at all. Chatburn tries to cut back to the inside, and Cameron there very, very careful to not go into the side of him. Very close stuff, but nice and tidy from all three of them there as Ressar now gets ahead in the Nissan GTR. Let's see what Colin Cameron can do about potentially spying an opportunity here and diving through if the door gets opened by a move from either of the cars ahead.
Yeah, it's tricky for Colin Cameron because it's not his battle. He's a silver driver. They are AM drivers. You know, there's no benefit to him taking their positions, but he needs to in order to chase down Shepherd. And what in a perfect world, he'd just like them to let him through.
Yeah.
Because there's no point detriment to them. But that's not going to happen. They're racing drivers. They're fighting with each other, and they're going to defend every point. And it's a matter of honour. These two AM drivers, it is a bragging right that they are in the top 10, given the level of skill in this series as they come up to the first corner again uphill, and the GTR, he's gone wide. Has he missed the apex? Has that allowed Aiden to go through? They're going to be side by side, and Reza just holds on to it. That's just the brute force, the sort of brute speed of the GTR as they make contact with each other, and Colin Cameron's lost it through the S's. Was that just a bit of a lack of downforce when you're running so close to another car, do you think?
Could have been a bit of that as well, but I think maybe with Chatburn running wide, he felt like he needed to adjust his line. He put a lot more lock on to the left-hand side, and that pendulum effect that you mentioned before, Cammy, definitely came into play there. The car went one way, then the other very quickly on him, and there wasn't any saving that, I'm afraid, for Colin Cameron. He hasn't lost too much ground from it, but still, he'll be hating the fact that he made that mistake. It all started, though, when Ressar just went a bit too hot into turn one, felt the need to defend from Chatburn. Chatburn got into Ressar's head by just moving slightly over to the left-hand side. Ressar aimed at the apex, went way too deep, and that checked all three of them up then, which meant that Colin had to make that adjustment and ultimately had a spin.
Ressar handling this pressure very well, I might add, keeping a very calm head on those shoulders. But these two, the more they fight with each other, they are very far behind the AM class leader, Adam Gardner, who is running 5th overall now. Of course, there are drivers who have pitted, but to be that far up and chase it, getting closing in on Brendan Rooney, goes a little bit deep into the final corner there, but closing up on Rooney. And do you remember Rooney and Jongen were fighting it out between each other in the first couple of laps, and Rooney definitely a driver capable of podium finishes and has been looking for that sort of first win of the season, but just not feeling it here. Jongen making that 992 work better.
Yeah, that's the thing. It depends. I mean, certain drivers... we spoke earlier about the nuances of individual cars and the way that they can work, but it also comes down to matching it up to a decent driving style as well that suits said car. That's one of the beautiful things about GT3 racing, is there's not only the performance statistics of each machine, but it's how each driver handles that on top of it as well. There's so many variables, and that's why GT racing, regardless of what type of GT racing, is always so enjoyable. Chatburn right now looks really confident on the brakes in this Ferrari compared to Ressar, but Ressar is just able to keep it ahead through certain sections of the circuit. But look at the stability coming from the Ferrari 296 through there. It's like Ressar's carrying another 500 kilos in the back of that Nissan as they make their way round the edge of the S's through the left-hander once again. But just this natural concertina effect makes it look a bit closer than it is. But even still, Aidan Chatburn was flying through the S's section there, and that was very impressive. But now look, the Nissan, foot down, gets away slightly with the massive amounts of stability that it has. But again, Ressar just tucks in a little bit early to the apex. Doesn't need to from that sort of distance. But it just screams of desperate defence right now, when I don't really think for Reina that it's completely necessary at this moment in time.
Maybe just a little bit nervous. He knows that, as I said, this is almost a replay of Suzuka where Rooney couldn't get past Ressar in the GTR because you've just got this massive, as Chatburn closes right up again, that Constantina effect. Yeah, the GTR can just... It's slower in the apexes and in the S-curves, but it can... It's a big object. You can't drive through it. But then on the straights, it has that brute force where it can just pull away. It just has that sheer power. And no amount of aerodynamic downforce is helping the Ferrari because he's got nowhere to go once he closes up on the GTR in the corners. So exactly the same issue with Rooney. So maybe this is where some of those karting lines what needs to come along, where you've just got to duck in and out a little bit, get the Nissan GTR off its line, get Ressard defending thin air more as well, and just force a mistake.
Well, that's it. I mean, you have to play the mind games, I guess. When you can't physically get around a car or find an easy way through, you need to just start playing mind games. One thing I'm worried about, though, is Aiden Chatburn isn't really compromising much for Ressar's braking, and he's braking as late as he normally would and closing up to the back very quickly. There's a Ferrari 488 there just on the inside of the corner, which hopefully will get out of the way. Yes, dives over to the left-hand side, or is that actually getting out of the way? I don't think it is, to be honest with you. No, it's not, and you can see Ressar already unsettled slightly by the presence of this Ferrari in front as well as the Ferrari behind. This is one of the moments where you need to really keep your head when lap traffic comes in to affect things and doesn't immediately get out of the way. That Ferrari has just nipped out of the pit lane. Not quite sure which one of them it is, unfortunately. Like I say, all new liveries and numbers and all sorts to me right now. But Ressar just needs to keep his head and guide his way past the Ferrari. If the Ferrari has their wits about them with the blue flags, they'll move out of the way here, as they are doing. Lovely job.
That is the old Ferrari, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the 488, that one, not the 296. Still, very potent racing machine, still used by a lot of teams around the world, but yeah, it's interesting to see that not all drivers have gone for it. Maybe the budget didn't match for this season, I'm not sure. But still, the 296 that we have on our screen right now of Aiden Chatburn, still worrying me a little bit, because Aiden is closing up loads on the brakes and a little bit too much. I'm scared that he's going to hit the back of this GTR, you know. No disrespect to Aiden, but it's just looking that way for now, I think.
There's Yellowneck. Was that Yellowneck? No, that was... I'm not sure. We had an AMG going very deep in the corner there. I thought it was Yellowneck. Or it could have been Shepherd. It's hard to tell. So how do you deal with this in real life? Because obviously when you're commentating in the real world, you don't have sort of the ease of access to information as you do in sim racing. I know we don't have the names above the drivers' cars. It's quite realistic in that respect. But how was the adjustment for you from commentating on sim racing to the real world and sort of having to quickly identify cars out on track without sort of this electronic help?
To be fair, I think it's quite the opposite. I always find with ease of access of information, because of the extra paperwork and the extra, you know, the stages of getting registered for events and taking part in them, I often find you do get given more information in the real world. It's harder to come into a sim racing event and, you know, you won't know who anybody is. There's so many ways that, because sim racing is so accessible, that people can just go racing and you won't know about it. You know, it's not a real world series that people can easily identify or see again. You know, there could be hundreds of leagues on here that run GT3 cars, because that is the niche of Assetto Corsa Competizione. But I often go into leagues and series and don't know who anybody is, and there's no cemented way of documenting people's progress, what championships they've run in and when and where they finished, and you know how successful they are. It's only really when you get to the proper top level of sim racing that everybody might know a certain name, for example. You know, there's loads of different communities and corners of the world in sim racing where we won't have discovered drivers. But one thing that I pointed out a while ago to somebody was that if we were commentating on a sim race like we are now, you know, we might not have the livery file for this person's car, but on their screen they might have a different colour. If you run it on your PC, you might have said file, so it would look like a red Ferrari to me, and it could have a different livery on it to you. In the real world, it is what it is. If it's a blue Porsche, it's a blue Porsche for everybody. You know, it makes the same... Well, it looks the same to everybody, and I always find that the information is more easily accessible. You can easily research drivers and find out a bit more about where they've been and what they've done before. So it's interesting, because I find this actually now a little bit more difficult than commentating in the real world. There's just a lot more logistics involved in the real world side of things, instead of me trotting down here into my office at home and sitting here in front of my computer screen like I do with every sim racing league that I do. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I mean, do you make a point in real world to sort of head down to the paddocks and meet drivers as well? Does that help you sort of get to know them? And you know, how do they, as we jump to the front, this is Rooney trying to defend from Gardner.
Yeah, Rooney's going slightly backwards here, but not in a massively quick way. He's not completely dropping away, as Chatburn has now been given a drive-through penalty in the Ferrari, and into the pits instantly to serve that is Aiden. So not quite sure what's gone on there, but the Ferrari 296, which still looks like some sort of spaceship from the back, doesn't it, is now trundling down the pit lane.
That could be track limits.
Yes, good point, actually. Good point. And he was pushing hard as well. I mean, he was all over the back of the Nissan GTR and trying to find any avenue around it, so that's potentially what's happened there. And unfortunately, he's paid the price with a drive-through. Here's Adam Gardner very late on the brakes. You could see that Rooney was ready to compensate for the McLaren that was a lap down, and a great run off the corner by Adam. Don't think he's going to get it done down the actual straight itself, or they're not quite straight over a crest, 90 left, don't cut, and so on. But you've got to just try and do it late on the brakes here, Adam. I think he's going to do it.
He's well positioned.
Is that BMW as well for position behind them? No, it's not. It's the McLaren, isn't it, still? Apologies. I thought it was one of the BMWs that was closing out. God knows how I've confused a McLaren for a BMW. I'm really ashamed of myself. But nice stuff there by Gardner to go through. But now it checks up on the apex. The Lamborghini needs to be careful in there as well, because that Lamborghini is not on the same lap as these cars either. So again, you just have to take care in these situations, and hopefully this sorts itself out, because it's a bit of a nerve-wracking time for all of them involved, I think.
Yeah, and that's Stefuk as well in the Lamborghini, and it's unusual to see Stefuk so far back, because Stefuk was he led some of the laps at Valencia, one of the prior rounds. So he's gone from having a great championship to having one to forget. As we're following Luke Sherlock, he's in 27th. He's got one of his pit stops done, and there's a couple just hitting those painful sausage curbs. You know, he's thank you lucky stars you're not racing this for real, because your spine would not be thanking you. Alex Parkin in 30th with a drive-through penalty. ML in 32nd also with the drive-through penalty. So yeah, these drivers, they get free warnings if they cut the track, and the simulator deems they've gained an advantage. As Alex Parkin coming into service drive-through penalty. I just heard Chaz wincing audibly there. Late on the brakes, as late as he dared, and I think he took out the cone and did go into the barrier. And Mark ML's done the same thing and had to bail out. And have you ever seen this in the real world?
I've seen David Coulthard hit the pit wall coming in, but I've never seen him sort of go in and then completely miss it and then go wide. But yeah, that's a real shame that by Marco. He's certainly going to remember that one. But yeah, I mean, it looked like Parkin was parking it early, to be fair, and in the wrong place as well, right into the end of the pit wall. That's going to be an embarrassing one to watch back for him. We look here at Mike Brown, though, in the Porsche, chasing down Zach Silver in the Audi. I'm sure that a lot of people would know which colour they would prefer if they had to choose from certain medals, for example. Silver ahead of, well, let's call him Mike Bronze at the moment, as right behind him now, he's got the Ferrari in, well, actually, the Ferrari's 2.3 seconds back, just coming up the hill. There's another Lamborghini between themselves and the next car, and that is, again, the 114 machine from further down the order that caused the issue earlier on. That's Nathan Berry, isn't it? Car 114. And he nearly went into the back of a car a lap ahead once again there, so hopefully Nathan doesn't repeat that little incident that we saw from him earlier, as Mike Brown, well, 13's unlucky for some. It certainly looked unlucky through the S's there. That Porsche did not want to behave itself. But again, when you've got that physical target in front of you, like you said before, Cammy, the carrot to chase right in front of you, you do find yourself pushing a little bit too hard, don't you, at these stages of a race, when you're trying to just make the overtake and make a point.
It is very easy to do that. Of course, we look at these cars and go, well, they're only half a second behind. But for a race driver, that's a huge margin. They're working in the thousandths and the hundredths of a second. And when you see the driver ahead has, just eked out a couple more hundredths on you on that lap, it can push maybe slightly more inexperienced drivers to just push a little bit too hard. I think it's important to remember you have to run your own race and you have to pace yourself. It's like a marathon. When someone starts running off ahead of you on the London Marathon, you don't suddenly start running faster. You have to stick to your own game plan, because for all you know, they're going to wear themselves out quicker and they're not pacing themselves, and then you'll pass them just before the line. But some of these drivers, it can be tempting to just, I'll just push a little bit harder because I did it in qualifying. But of course, in qualifying, you're running so much closer to the edge. You'll have a much lighter fuel load as well. And you're pushing closer to the edge because you can just return to the garage and try again. But of course, in the race, you don't have that luxury, as we watch Ollie Knowles and I think that's Scrub coming in to serve their first pit stops of the evening.
Yeah, it's one of those moments, isn't it, in a race where you're in a completely different set of circumstances. You're chasing another car. You're trying to obviously deal with a little bit of dirty air as well. These cars are very aerodynamically dependent for GT cars. You know, the aerodynamics are getting more and more sophisticated as time goes on, and the cars rely on that more and more each time. But right now, our leader, Jonathan Seville, well, he's miles ahead at the moment, 21.5 seconds. He's really having a good run of it this evening, car 97. And he just continues to look nice and tidy, doesn't he? He's clipping the curbs here and there in this Ferrari, but handling it really, really beautifully. And Jeroen Jongen in second place in the Porsche is going to be just seeing that gap go up and up and up, but still has to just keep his head in the game and tell himself, look, I'm second here. I'm doing a really good job, because he is at the end of the day. He's doing exactly what he needs to do. I'm just intrigued by the pit window here, because obviously it opened only a couple of minutes into the race and will close just a few minutes before the end of the race. But right now we've got a lot of drivers that still have not done a single pit stop. The entire top 10 and even 11th place Davenport are yet to pit here. So I'm excited to see how quickly people can turn these splash and dashes around.
Seville, very well known in this series for doing his pit stops right at the end of the race. At Valencia, he took his pit stops maybe with 10 minutes to go and then with 5 minutes to go, and each one was just a 1 litre splash and dash, and he came in the lead and sort of left the pits still in the lead, as Leighton Austin coming under pressure from Colin Cameron, but need not worry. Leighton Austin's got his pit stops done.
I was going to say that is Seville.
That is Seville, isn't it?
He's not getting out of the way. Is Leighton Austin? That's never mind under pressure. He's not even realised he's under pressure to just shove it out of the way. To be fair, I mean, like I say, the BMW is like a housing block on wheels. As there you go, finally he realises that the Ferrari behind him is not one to start defending from. And Jonathan flashing the lights a little bit in frustration, I can imagine, just as a reminder, just to say, come on, sunshine, you need to get that big beefy thing out of the way. I mean, it's far from subtle, that number 23 BMW. But yeah, just in his own little world there for a moment. But it's unsurprising. There was no cars around him whatsoever. And all of a sudden he thought, oh, hang on, what's this flashing thing in the rearview mirror now? It's not the sun coming up, is it? And then there you go. Jonathan makes his way through in the end.
Stefuk has picked up a drive-through penalty. And, not to pressure you, Chaz. Not to pressure you, because it's a nerve-wracking thing commentating online in a series you're not used to. But we have 5 people watching.
Well, welcome to all 5 of them, and I hope you're all enjoying the show so far. It's good to be here, as Chris Stefuk nearly ends up in Oklahoma as he runs a little bit wide through the left-hander, and maybe a little bit deterred by his drive-through penalty. But yeah,
is that the next state?
It is, yes.
Somebody knows their US states.
Well, I'm not going to pretend like I did. I had to Google it just in case I made the joke, because I often do. So it's a joke I make often. So whenever it's a stupid thing to Google for every venue I commentate at. Really, I just see what's around it, and then know that if someone runs really wide, I can make a joke about where they geologically might have ended up, or geographically, I should say. On board now with Alex Shahabi in the Porsche. Aston Martin. Sorry, I was so concentrated on looking at the Porsche in front of Knowles that I said that this was a Porsche. Clearly, it is not. Making a fantastic sound, though, as the Porsche would as well. But this is the V12 Vantage GT3, car number 8. We've not seen a V12 engine in an Aston Martin race car for quite a while, and it makes me very sad. But that's not to say that the turbocharged V8 that we get in the current Aston Martin Vantage GT3 is not a good sounding lump in the front. It's a great, great engine. And right now, I'd say Shahabi's doing this car justice, because we all know that this is by far not going to be the quickest car out there if you had them all compared on paper. Another car ends up in Oklahoma. There you go, Cammy.
You can make use of that gag as many times as you like. The oNiD official team there, was Grubb going quite wide, manages to hold on to the position. Ollie Knowles is closed right up. But yeah, I was going to say, when you say about the V12s, obviously now they're V8, how do you feel with the new Ferrari being a V6?
Oh, it sounds horrendous.
Are you are you a fan of the minimization of these engines coming along in sort of F1 fashion, where they just think, we'll just complement it with a turbo or two?
I like the idea and the efficiency behind it, but at the same time, admittedly, and this is going to sound really, really harsh, I've not been excited by the noise of a Ferrari GT car for a long time. for a while, because obviously when you turbocharge an engine, it usually brings the rev limiter down and they don't make as much of a noise. As Ollie Knowles is making a visual noise down the inside of the McLaren right now, parks it nicely on the apex. Great cutback by Scrub as well. Knowles moves over to the left slightly though to try and coax Scrub away from him, and Ollie manages to go through and stay in front now before the S's. But yeah, coming back to my point, I've not been excited by a Ferrari race car for quite a while in terms of the noise when it comes to their GT3 machinery anyway. It's got a bit of a droney mid-tone sound to it. It's not either end of the scale like a really low rumbly V8 that's just like a rolling thunderstorm, and it's not a high-pitched screaming V10 like you'd get in the Audi R8s or the Lamborghini Huracans. Another car similar to it is actually the McLaren 720S, but it makes a much more raspy noise with its turbocharged V8. You know, it's an interesting sound that isn't the usual rumble, like I say. So, I don't know. I like the idea of the technology behind it and the reasons for it, because at the end of the day, it's development within motorsport. But I think, as a fan, it doesn't make as much of a sort of ooh noise as Ralph Vest is now. Whoa,
Oh, it's
dearie
gone
me.
very wrong.
Ralph has pulled the vest over his face there, and he's not watched where he's going. He just completely lost him. Not sure whether that's a hardware failure or something, but it's clearly not that bad because he's carried on. But yeah, the car very damaged, as you could expect, Cammy. That was a massive one, that.
Yeah, Silver was in the firing line for that one. His R8 took a whack from that. The only R8 in the race. That's another car that's taken a bit of a nerf when it comes to the BOP updates. It's a little bit tricky in its handling. I've sort of driven a few of these cars. I've done a few series of oNiD, and the R8 definitely a little bit twitchy, a little bit tricky to handle. And Silver in the pits now. I just wonder how many seconds he's going to have to sit there having that damage repaired, because he was not expecting that.
No, definitely not. It was a very, very big hit, and on the front end as well. And like you say, most of the characteristics of the Audi R8 is that it's got this very skinny rear end on it, and it's very floaty at the back is the Audi, because it's got such a pointy front end on it as well. I've raced the older versions of the car myself on iRacing for a few GT seasons, and I can tell you that going through corners like 130R at Suzuka is nightmare-inducing. I think I've still got PTSD from the championships that I did there, where we had 3 races in a night, and all 3 of my races ended in the barrier on the outside of 130R because I simply could not get that car around there. Certainly one of the most difficult to drive when it comes to GT3 machinery. As we go back on board with Rooney now, you can see him wrestling the car slightly, just managing that momentum and the slide on the exit of corners. But what a great racket this Porsche makes. He needs to just tell himself now, though, that Ressar isn't really anything to worry about, because there's 2 pit stops still needed by Rayner. So Rooney needs to remember that and make sure that he doesn't focus on how much time he's losing here behind this Nissan once he closes up to the back of it.
No, nor does he. Hopefully he's not having flashbacks of Suzuka as well.
Oh,
as Rayner got on the flashes there, the indicator came on, moved over to the left, going into the pit lane to serve the first of their 2 mandatory pit stops. As Brendan now released into clear air, and that can be a good or a bad thing. Obviously, he's got clear open air, he can put his foot down, but nobody to chase. Although somebody is coming out the pit lane. That's Henry Handy. No, it's Adam Gardner. My apologies. Adam Gardner's has come out the pits just in front of Rooney, as Zach Silver's just picked up a drive-through penalty as we speak. But Adam Gardner able to hold on to that 5th place. And if Rooney wants to get past, he's going to have to do it now, whilst maybe Gardner's tyre pressures aren't quite up to standard, as Mike Brown goes up the inside of Luke Sherlock, who in the blue livery, that is the oNiD Racing Stronger, a team to Racing Stronger promotes mental health through the power of sim racing.
A lovely, lovely image to carry, and of course we wish Luke all the best in the race, but now he's got a fight on his hands with Brown in the Porsche, and 2 very, very different cars going up against one another, but Luke has overdone it slightly there, to say the least. And he really does end up in Oklahoma, gets back on the circuit, and Brown now will be laughing for the next couple of corners as he makes it away and has some decent, I was going to say daylight between himself and the car behind, but no. There's been a stop-go penalty for 30 seconds given to Jeroen Jongen from 11th position. So Jeroen has done something naughty along the way, and
that's
unfortunately
speeding in the pit lane.
Ah, right, I see. So there you go. Jeroen, while taking both pit stops, has now earned himself another one, I'm afraid. That's a real shame to see. He's also lost a position on this lap as well to Ian Hall, that's just gone in front of him in the other Porsche.
devastating for Youngren because, of course, he fought hard. He'd got past Rooney, he'd got past Hearn, he'd fought his way up into second place, but now that second place could be in jeopardy if he's got to not only sit there for 30 seconds, but also the time lost going through the pit lane. So this is music to Hearn, Gardner and Rooney's ears. Of course, they've still got to serve some... Well, Rooney's got one pit stop out the way, but Seville, Hearn, Jurgelis and Thorpe all still have 2 pit stops to take. But that's going to be very painful for Youngren, and he's immediately back on the attack as Zach Silver comes out the pit lane, having served his drive-through penalty. And he rejoins in 28th place. He might have just lost... That's car's a lap up. That was actually Rooney going past on the next lap. But here's Reza keeping Youngren behind, and Reza is a bit of a minister of defence, so he could hold Youngren up here.
To be fair, you could probably house the entire Ministry of Defence inside that Nissan GTR shell, although there you go. Straight on cue, your own Youngren goes through down the inside, and, well, we all know that wasn't always going to be the biggest of fights, but your own is going to immediately undo it and come into the pit lane, making sure that he definitely doesn't speed this time. Nice and early on the brakes, rain light on, and the Tron-like visor of the rear light of that Porsche looks fantastic, doesn't it? It's such a good-looking rear end on the Porsche 992. I was lucky enough to see one of the first ones that actually came off the production line, which was being displayed in Misano in Italy at a race meeting there, one of the GT3 cars that is, and it was just awesome to see it. And it was one of the moments where you go weak at the knees knowing that you're one of the first people to see one of those cars. It was awesome to see it. Henry Handy, currently, well, I'd have to say my favourite name in the field so far. Hopefully he's actually, I was going to say hopefully, but he's really showing that he is quite handy in that Ferrari as well, with Shepherd in front of him, hoping to round him up, so to speak, as this race goes into its final stages. We're into the last half hour now, and it's actually flown by so far, and I imagine for the drivers it probably hasn't, because doing Circuit of the Americas in the daytime is hard enough. Doing it at night is twice as difficult. But Shepherd holding on well to second place in class right now. It's a shame, really, because in that class there's not been as many battles going on, has there, Cammy? The qualifying session really did show a difference in pace between all of them, but still, they've got to run their own race, and you've got to get the thing home in the first place, haven't you?
Yeah, of course, and drivers always have their favourite circuits, and it might just happen that this is a favourite for some, and it's a Hermann Tilke circuit, so you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. I'm not a fan of it personally. I'd probably be further down the order than I would be than if I was at maybe one of the British circuits, but yeah, it's a bit of a Marmite circuit. As Jonathan Seville still leading the way in complete control. We can't actually see the split between himself and Hearn. They've obviously Hearn's not come across
35
sector.
seconds.
It is 35 seconds, and these drivers both yet to take any pit stops. And you were speaking about the Tron lights. It seems to be a bit of a fashion that's coming, because obviously the Ferrari 299P, is it, the hypercar, has a Tron light, as does the Porsche hypercar. Has a bit of a sort of an LED beam across the back. And you're a big fan of those?
Yeah, I think it looks really cool. It's just the way that it sort of connects both sides of the car. I just love the way that it looks. It reminds me of the old Porsche 959s as well, which had a very similar design a long time ago in the late 80s to early 90s. The Porsche 959, it carried a very similar trend, and it's almost like the 911 has gone back into that direction, but with a modernised twist to it. So it's very cool to see. There's a great example of two of them right now, as we see Mike Brown chasing down Ralph Vest in the number 3 machine. Only 0.4 of a second between them last time out. Importantly, they've both served both of their pit stops so far, so now this is the sprint to the flag for them both. There's still 25 minutes left of this race, which is more than your average sprint race in most championships. So we'll see who can manage it towards the end, because like we said before, Cammy, even in a race that's just an hour and a quarter long, fatigue can still set in. It's very physically demanding, it's mentally demanding as well. It's one thing that people seem to ignore about sim racing, is that it takes a lot of effort to still do this. You're still putting in the same efforts you would do in the real car. Obviously, you just don't have to put it with a lot of the G-forces and maybe similar temperatures and so on. But still, you have to tell your mind and move your body in a very similar way, which is why it's so realistic and why we all love it so much.
Of course, and given that sim racing, you don't have those senses of G-forces, your mind is having to work harder to interpret less data. obviously these drivers only get a visual and what they feel through their hands with force feedback, which is, a very limited form of feedback compared to what you get in a real racing car. So their mind is sort of working overtime, trying to take less information and process it. Is my car oversteering or understeering? I don't know. I can't feel it. I have to process that visually. And of course, it's a very hot, humid, muggy day in Britain at the moment. And they've got these supercomputers with their 3080, 4080 graphics cards. One of which that Dan's probably sold them. K-Dan do some great computer setups. Go to them if you need it. But it'll be making their rooms very hot. So they're sitting there in a hot, sweaty room, computer running at full blast. We don't all have air conditioning in the UK, so it's probably just a fan recirculating warm air. They can't quickly grab a drink. A lot of these drivers they won't have they don't have a drink system attached to them. Some of them, if they've remembered, they've poured themselves some Coca or Ribena or something for them to grab. But it's very demanding. It's not. When I think of calling it gaming, I feel like I'm doing them a disservice.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's a lot more than that, and it's so close to the real thing that that's why we treat it as such. Sometimes people do ask me questions and say why is it that people take it so seriously? Why do people always take so much from it and get so involved with it? And it's like, this is, for a lot of us, this is the closest we will get to doing it for real. We don't all have the budgets and the contacts to be able to do these sorts of things. So to be able to go sim racing like this with the accessibility of it is just awesome. It's really, really awesome. As that is a large send, to say the least. And it was messy from Vest, and he's had a few little moments tonight, hasn't he, where he's just overdone it slightly and caused an issue. And I'm afraid that in trying to recuperate there, Vest has actually caused himself more of a problem. It was a bit of everything from everybody there, wasn't there? It all concertinaed together very suddenly.
It was. There's Ralph Vest up ahead, and we're just going to see what's going to happen. They come into turn one. I don't think so. Vest has had the Porsche go up the inside, and Vest has tried to get the cut back and just clipped the back of the number 13 there.
Yeah, admittedly, Brown was way too hot into the corner in the first place, but Ralph, for some reason, just had the car run very wide on the exit. I think he expected to be able to get a run off the corner, and it just didn't work for him. And we've now got Colin Cameron here in the Ferrari, also taking on the number 13 machine of Mike Brown. Mike's going to have to try and defend for his life now. They've also got Chiol behind them as well, with still a pit stop to go. And then there's another Lamborghini, which is Stefiuk in number 96. Back to Jeroen Jongen, down in 21st place after his penalty earlier on. He's just got past the McLaren there of Scrub in car number 10. And that's another one off the list for Jeroen on this climb back through the order, but he's not got long to complete said climb back through the order now, unfortunately. Chatburn also still has a pit stop, so he's just enjoying the sights and sounds of the Aston Martin V12 Vantage for the moment. As right now, he tries to go around the outside into the final few corners. I expect he'll be pitting here because he seemed to be very eager to back out of that. And yes, he is. Into the pit lane comes the Ferrari.
Yeah, it's quite handy when you've come up against some stubborn traffic and you've got to take a pit stop still. It's a bit of a strategy joker card. I'll play it now and I'll hopefully get myself into some free air, because the worst thing is when you get stuck behind somebody and they're on a different strategy to you, but you need to get past them. And if you've got your pit stops out the way and they haven't, and you're stuck behind them and they're not pitting, it can absolutely throw your race and your strategy into turmoil, where you just think, we're not in the same race as each other, please let me by. But of course they're not gonna. They're gonna defend for their life. It's a matter of pride. And when we were talking about the different real life racing and sim racing and the respect we give it, in real life, of course, the cars can get problems. This doesn't really happen. Sim racing, none of their engines are gonna blow, but their computers can. And what we had happen last year is temperatures in the UK got close to 40 Celsius. These guys and girls were soldiering on and still sim racing in 40-degree heat. And unfortunately, some of their computers and their graphics cards just went, nope, it's too hot for me. I need to shut down to not pop a processor. And we had drivers dropping out because their computers simply couldn't handle it. So, and that is another factor that comes into it, that whilst the cars are fine, the computers come up against problems as cars would in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. I've always said that one thing we tend to do is we leave the mechanical and technical issues down to the hardware and the software and even internet connections as well. You know, as someone that's been plagued by a terrible internet connection for many years, as Dan very well knows. I mean, it's the reason I'm here, to be fair. Dan's done a lot to help me sort out my my new fibre connection in the last couple of months and get everything running. So I said to him, I'll pop on a broadcast tonight as a thank you and help out as part of the community. But yeah, I've been plagued by it for a while, and obviously trying to do broadcasting as well on top of trying to do some racing. Knowing that there could be an issue like that adds that extra bit of nerves to an event that you take part in, because again, like you have in the real world, there are some drivers and competitors that are more often affected by technical issues than others. But I don't think it would be right to leave it down to the simulator to determine who that would be, because everyone would then claim that, you know, they're the ones that get hard done by and nobody else does, and so on. So I think it's quite nice that it's still a very natural occurrence, that any technical issues, failures and whatever else, they are left literally down to real-world chance. So there's a very human element involved in that, despite it not always being in human control.
That's it. And I mean, for some people, it can just be a fact that their cat walked across and stepped on a key on a keyboard, or tugged on a cable and pulled out a USB out the back of the computer that was responsible for the pedals. As we watch Miles Dixon, still yet to take a pit stop, running in 6th place. We've not running in 4th place. We've not really focused on Miles at all. He's kept out of trouble and just had a very quiet race on his own. And sometimes that's just the best way to be. As Brendan Rooney's in the
pit lane.
Just heard. So what was that, Dan?
He started from the pit lane.
Of course he did. Yeah, Miles Dixon started from the pit lane. One of those drivers who had a qualifying ban, so was just going to start from the back, but actually started from the pit lane. So to be up in 4th position, I mean, solid. We'll see. Yeah, where he'll be after his pit stops, though, is yet to be seen, because all the drivers behind him, Jurgelis has taken one, Rooney has taken both of them, Leighton Austin has taken both, as Thorpe moves up into 6th place. I think that might have just been with Rooney coming out of the pit lane, actually.
I think he may still be quite safely inside the top 10, though, Miles Dixon, you know. I think he's pulled a blinder here, to be honest. He's definitely the flagship Lamborghini at the moment. I'm very impressed by Gardner as well, actually. Adam Gardner up there in 3rd position. Sure, he's still got 1 pit stop to do, but most of the cars around him have got 2. And he's obviously not in the top pro class here. But he's putting in a great effort in that number 787 Ferrari. I may disagree with delivery, but he's certainly doing the job. As in comes Mr. Hearn from 2nd place in the race in the McLaren. That Porsche's definitely got some soft suspension on it, the way it just bounced then, flipping heck. But right now, final pit stops being completed. It's interesting to see them being done this late on, though, isn't it, Cammy? Because, as most of us will know, in 1 hour long races, usually the pit window is only about sort of 10 to 15 minutes in the middle. So the majority of the race here being the pit window certainly leaves it open to interpretation from drivers. So you get a good mix of strategies here.
Yeah, Seville, as always, seems to be leaving his pit stops to the last minute. There's just over 16 and a half minutes left to go of this race, and he still has to take both of his pit stops. But he has an enormous gap to Dan Hearn. So I suppose if you don't take your pit stops, it takes some of the guesswork out. At the end of the race, you only have to look at the gap behind you and go, right, I know I'm still leading this race, I know I'm not. Whereas you get these drivers in the mid-pack, they've got 1 pit stop done, they've got none. There's a bit of a guessing game that we have to sort of do to, okay, but where are they going to, when it's all said and done, they've got their pit stops all done, where are they going to come out? But with the speed that Seville has, maybe he doesn't feel he has to play the strategic game. He was, more than a second quicker than everybody else in qualifying, and he's just been in complete control of this race, hasn't he? There's Paul Shepherd in the AMG, closing up on Handy. They're in different classes. Paul Shepherd in the Championship or Silver class, Handy in the Pro class, but Shepherd just looking to try and get past that Ferrari. Handy not holding him up. I'm wondering if we just lost Chaz. Chaz, can you hear us?
Apologies, yeah. I'd made the very amateurish mistake of muting my microphone to just take a drink, and then in looking at the stream briefly, forgot to then unmute said microphone. But with this setup that I've got, I can always hear myself in my headset, whether it's muted or not, so I didn't realise I was muted. So my apologies, everybody. I'm still an amateur at heart.
No, it's Jerome Jongen up the inside of the V12 Aston of Shahabi for 15th place. So he's on a bit of a recovery drive now after that stop and go 30-second penalty, which is the I think that's the harshest penalty they can receive, apart from being disqualified. But Reza in 9th place still has to serve a pit stop though, as Shahabi comes back on the attack up into turn 1. He's as late on the brakes as he dared, but Jongen very firmly closed that door and holds on to that 15th place as they go through turns 3 and 4 into the S's now.
Yeah, to be fair, I've thought of a worse punishment than having a stop-go penalty for 30 seconds, and that's driving the Jaguar XKR, to be honest. But if I'm honest with you, I think it's one of the most beautiful and fantastic sounding GT3 cars ever made. It's just an absolute pig and very, very slow. So it's a shame that we don't see more of that car, but obviously it's for good reason, and that is that it is truly awful to drive. But still, Shahabi
has driven it. He has driven it.
It doesn't surprise me, to be honest, with the fact that he's still giving the Aston V12 a go here, which is great to see. Like I say, another gorgeous and fantastic sounding machine. But Shahabi strikes me as one of those drivers as if to say, you know what, I'm going to go different here. We're going to try something else. I was actually ridiculed for doing similar with my good friend Tom Brooks a while ago. And we took part in a charity race organised by Jimmy and his wonderful team during COVID. And we were on iRacing and everyone was driving GT3 cars and decided to go for the usual, your Mercedes, your Audis and so on. And me and Tom thought, everyone's going to choose a meme car. Everyone's going to just do this for a laugh and have silly liveries. We paid a tribute to the Formula 1 commentator Jonathan Ledyard and named our team after him and painted a livery with him all over it on the Ford GT3 car, which was a real pig. And we finished last, unsurprisingly, while everybody else actually took it quite seriously in the end. So Shahabi strikes me as a driver close to my own heart, who likes to take the different cars out on the circuit that no one else will, and prove to people that they still have some potency about them.
He does, but nobody ever picks the Rex, the old Lamborghini Rex.
Yes.
Is about that. Yeah, that would be about 7 or 8 seconds a lap slower around here. No doubt, even more possibly. Yeah, there are sort of meme cars, and then there's the Rex that nobody picks. Nobody picks that, unfortunately. No. But I mean, I liked the subtle name dropping, the humble brag, I believe they called it. The Tom Brooks and the Jimmy. You don't even have to say Broadbent. If you say Jimmy, everybody knows who you're talking about.
Very true. It was not subtle. I do apologise.
Was that the Buckmore Park 20? Have you done the Buckmore Park 24-hour with Jimmy?
I commentated it when Jimmy was there in 2019. That was good fun, actually. That was a very, very fun event. But no, the charity event in question was the Get This Bread 3 hours of Imola during the COVID pandemic in 2020, which was an awesome amount of fun, and again affected by my horrendous internet. But I didn't mean to name drop in such a shameless fashion. I do apologise.
No, by all means, please do. I mean, I suppose I've had a similar experience to you. Sort of COVID and lockdown and such was one of those opportunities for sort of unknown entities such as ourselves to be on a level playing field and sort of make a name for ourselves. At the time I was, as I will interrupt myself, say Jonathan Seville, race leader, has come in to serve his first pit stop, 11.5 minutes left of the race, only 6.5 minutes left to get around the track and make a second pit stop. But yeah, I used to race for foot, and that's how quick it was. A splash and dash, and he's heading back out. But I was able, I raced with Fordzilla, I was able to race against drivers that I never dreamed of being able to race against. And it just sort of opened the door for me to have conversations and regarding my own design work, be able to meet people and do some design work with sort of drivers I've looked up to and respected in, across GT racing and open wheel series. So it's great seeing, it's like with Dan as well. I know he's sort of quiet and behind the scenes, but he's come from, I say Dan, like putting this politely, you've come from nothing to be able to, you've worked with motorsport games, you do the camera work for GB3 and GB4, and it gives me this sense of pride of, look at us. We've come from just gaming and sim racing and, maybe doing it for a laugh to, now we're doing what we love. And when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Well, absolutely. And commentary is something I adore doing and will hopefully continue to do for the rest of my life. I still have those moments, though, where I tell myself, you'll go back to a 9 to 5 one day, and I'm sort of waiting for the inevitable to happen, but still, we're here as we've got two Porsches battling very closely together. This is Knowles and Brown right together. Sounds like a really bad Solicitors, doesn't it? As Brown's overdone it. It's definitely a bad Solicitors. And he's also just lost a bucket load of time there to the car ahead. And Knowles, well, he's going to be happy with that one now. He's got a bit of clean air back behind him. No one to worry about for a little bit. Colin Cameron finds himself yet again behind Ralph Vest in the green Porsche. And after seeing the previous driving displays where both of them have made mistakes, they're going to be a little bit wary around overtaking each other. We also then have Stefiuk just in front in the Lamborghini, and then that aforementioned battle with Brown and Knowles not too far up the road. There's a McLaren there that I believe is getting lapped, is it not? Because it's not Scrub, is it, in that machine? I think it's not even Sherlock, is it? There's another McLaren involved that's not quite getting out of the way there. Or is it Sherlock?
I'm not sure. I mean, it could be Scrub.
No, it looks like a black and gold car, actually. Oh, it's the second place machine. It's the second place car, actually, putting a lap on these guys. Yes, it is Hearn. My apologies, yeah. I was instantly thinking it was a car further down the order, but no. Hearn up there now, putting a lap on these cars, rather than being lapped by them, as there you go, Jonathan Seville back into the pit lane once again. Not sure I like the... You know, we were talking about the novelty earlier of elements in the race being realistic. I'm not sure whether 2 pit stops in 2 laps as part of a strategy would be along those lines, to be honest. But even still, he's playing the game and he's taking advantage of the format, isn't he? That's all he can do at the end of the day. He
is, and I'm glad Dan... You can tell he's a seasoned professional with GB3, GB4.
Oh, no.
Stefiuk's gone round. That's Chris Stefiuk in the Lamborghini, and he's hit the barrier. There's going to be damage to that front splitter, and the pit window's about to close. 3 minutes left. He's trying to get it going again. I'm wondering if he stalled the engine briefly. Yeah, you can see just piled into the barrier. The bonnet, or the hood, hasn't popped open. It did struggle to get going. I wonder if the car was crabbing slightly just then, but he feels it's best to carry on. No point coming into the pits. He's just going to try and make to the end of the race. And yeah, the seasoned professional that Dan is, I'm glad that he's keeping with this battle, because with the history that Vest and Blancvist have had, it's not going to be boring. There's going to be action here, and I worry there's going to be some tears. It's going to go wrong for somebody, because these drivers are... Is hot-headed the word? I mean, they're very...
Exuberant.
They're very exuberant. Yes, thank you for helping me up there.
It's one of my favourite words that I think I heard once, and I just thought, that sounds like I know what I'm on about. I'm going to go with that one. But yeah, you're absolutely right though, Cammy. These 3 drivers, over the course of the race, have all shown a little bit of inconsistency, let's say, here and there. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just not the compromise of braking early because of the car in front, or, you know, just waiting and backing out slightly just to give that extra bit of room. They've all been a bit sendy as the race has gone on, so they won't take no for an answer here, and I'm excited to see how this battle unfolds. Despite the fact it is only for 18th, 19th and 20th, they're still going to push on as hard as they can.
But for Mike Brown and Ralph Vest, I think this is a fight for 3rd in the AM class. This could be a fight for... Yes, this would be a fight for 3rd in the AM class, so it's very important to them. Colin Cameron, on the other hand, just wants to get past them, but I think there's not enough time for him to catch General Scrub now, running up in 16th place. Car number 10 in his McLaren, so this is just a matter of honour, whether Colin Cameron wants to be behind 2 AM drivers or ahead of them, but it will make no difference to his points tally at the end of the evening. As Brown went wide there, Vest trying to take advantage, but Brown still able to hold Vest behind. Of course, Vest, our resident American, this could be considered his home race of the season. I'm not sure which state he lives in, actually. I don't know if you know that, Dan, because America is the big place.
It certainly is a very, very big place, and so is Texas as well. They say everything's bigger in Texas, and, well, so are the battles here, because they are not going away. We've got these 3 cars right together with each other. You've also got the... Which one of them is that, actually, in the background? Is that Rooney behind them? Just making up a bit of ground. It's not, is it? I thought Rooney was going to be going to lap them. Yeah, I think, yes, it is number 22, Davenport. My apologies. I didn't see whether it was a white and pink machine or whether it was just carrying the sort of similar pink on the rear end, but it's actually a black and pink car, isn't it? As we go back on board with Ralph Vest. And then, again, look at the different lines through the S's. It's such a hard part of the circuit to get right, and you can see when drivers are under pressure or trying to put on pressure on each other, because they all take very different lines to one another, and it makes for some interesting viewing because you get this concertina effect at a point of the circuit where you normally wouldn't. And look at the run that Brown gets on the exit, and Vest doesn't. He's now got the Ferrari all over the back of him, nearly going into the back of the Porsche and joining the engine in the rear end of the car, but still just avoiding contact for now. Colin Cameron is all over that Porsche once more, but again, needs to be careful here to brake early and compromise for what Vest does in front. Let's see how he manages it.
And with an hour and 10 of the race gone, 5 minutes to go, these tyres are very second-hand. And of course, on the Porsche, with that heavy rear end, we're going to find the difference. Who's been looking after their tyres, who hasn't. Colin Cameron looking up the inside, but Vest is confident enough that Colin will back off, won't make contact, and just closes that door. And I saw that, Dan, did we have a drive-through penalty? I think it was for Sudden Tuck Gibson, picked up a drive-through penalty. I think he's running up in 8th place. I don't know if he's served that yet, but that is going to affect his race negatively. He's running in 8th at the moment. He'd be thanking his lucky stars. It's not a stop-and-go or a stop-go 30, but that's going to see him drop down the order with just 4 minutes to go. So he's not going to get much time to do any recovering from that. Miles Dixon, who started from the pit lane, of course, both pit stops have completed now. He'll obviously take that 8th place from Tuck Gibson, so he doesn't need to push too hard in that regard. Martin Thorpe is 9 seconds further up the road, so Miles can relax now. He's going to take that 8th place. There's 3.5 minutes left to go, and he can be happy and proud that he's put on a fantastic performance tonight, worthy of the number 1 seat at Pole Simsport. Obviously, Miles Dixon is the owner of the team. Absolutely worthy of the position as we jump to Reynard Resser in your favourite car, I'd say, Jazz. You absolutely love this GTR.
I do indeed, yeah. It's another one of those cars that's not your stereotypical supercar shape. You know, it's not a really short-nosed, pointy supercar with the engine right behind the driver. It's a big old beefy Grand Tourer. But I mean, Nissan, when they brought out this latest iteration of the GTR, the R35, it blew the world away. You know, it was supercar performance for nowhere near the money. And in GT3 racing, it's been interesting to see the way that it's developed as well. The first versions of this car had a colossally big rear wing on them, and in time it has gradually been dialed down and down. And believe it or not, the version that we have here in this latest version of Assetto Corsa Competizione is not the one with the big wing. This is actually the smaller dialed down wing. There was a couple of them even competed, I believe, as a factory team in the British GT Championship when the car first arrived, with Sir Chris Hoy behind the wheel of one of them as well. As Ollie Knowles goes back down the inside of Scrub in one of the McLarens, as Scrub gets then blocked on the exit. Ollie Knowles knows exactly where to put the car. These two need to be mindful of the battle coming up from behind, though, because there's not long left in this race now, Cammy. If they carry on fighting like this, they're going to have a very busy final lap or so.
Yeah, some drivers, they'll be in a position where they just need to relax and just get it to the end. But when you're in a gaggle like this, it's a do-or-die moment. You know you need to make the move, and time is running out. And we can see, it's when you see some desperate attempts, and sometimes they do come off a bit half-baked and go a bit wrong and can spoil not only their own race, but also the race of the car ahead. As Jonathan Seville leading the way, both pit stops done. He's might as well be in another state. He's that far ahead of everybody else. He might as well be in Oklahoma, as Chaz has been saying. And
I think we are on the final lap.
And Dan's just saying they're on the final lap now. A minute and a half to go. It takes longer than that to get round. As Mike Brown's going to try and send it up the inside of Scrub. Scrub's going to try and hang it round the outside. He knows he's got the inside line for the next corner. Can he hold side by side? He cannot. Scrub loses the position to Brown. Brown is up into 17th place. And they're fighting. I mean, the AMs are fighting for that last step on the podium. But it doesn't, Scrub is not part of the AM class. But doesn't matter what position it is. They're going to fight for pride.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to think about the bragging rights here at the end of the day. It's all about building up your confidence as a driver, regardless of what class they're in. It's only when you get to the real end of a championship, so in the final round, which will be obviously coming up after this one, that's when you may see some drivers playing it safe, letting drivers from other classes through if they feel like it's not a necessary fight. But right now, with only 6 rounds in the season, you have to take what you can from every single one of them. It's not like you've got 15 rounds and you can pick them off one at a time and just glide your way through the season. You have to be so switched on for each and every race and how the points will affect you, and even just how mentally being beaten by certain drivers or beating other certain drivers can affect you going from round to round. It's an important part of the process, really, in multi-class racing, despite it being a one-category championship as such. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a level of... It's like, yeah, you as a pro driver, you don't want to see yourself beaten by an AM driver. There's a pride in that. Even that, oh no! On the last lap, Mike Brown's gone into the back of Knowles. Knowles is pointing the wrong direction, blocking the road. Vest has then gone into... No, it's all gone wrong on the final lap. But we're just waiting for Jonathan Seville to come across the line. He's just crossed the line. We just missed it as we were watching that little mid-pack pile-up. But Seville takes an absolutely commanding victory, takes the pole, takes the win here in Texas, and we're waiting for second place. And this man, Jongen, could have been it, but with his stop-and-go 30-second penalty, he's been demoted down the field. Dan Hearn is still on track for that second place, and Rooney, having not been the faster Porsche of the evening through a matter of consistency and not picking up penalties, is going to pick up that final podium spot, Chaz.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a solid drive by all of them right near the sharp end of the field. There's been some beautiful consistency on show, and like you say, just staying out of trouble has reigned supreme here. Not many McLarens in the field tonight, but Daniel Hearn has once again shown that it's one of the best cars to be in. And I want to know who hired that flagman at the end for flying the yellow flag instead of the checkered flag. Obviously, it's part of an incident, I know, but still, part of the fun, isn't it? But Daniel Hearn doing everything right there this evening in that McLaren. A very good job, and obviously good points for the championship. Rooney third, and what a great drive as well by Adam Gardner in fourth place, winning his class, and then, of course, Jurgilis as well, winning his necessary class. So some beautiful performances, and each of our class winners very deserving, as Jeroen Jongen now tries to get one final place from Handy into these last couple of corners, Cammy.
Yeah, this is a battle. It's going to go down to the wire. There only about 4 corners left to go. Can Jongen do it? Handy is holding on in the Ferrari. Given the hour and a quarter race, that Ferrari, I always think it's a bit more balanced than the Ferrari. His tyres, than the Porsche, tyres could be in a better condition. Jongen's been pushing very hard. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. Handy's got him covered off and crosses line, holds on to that position from Jongen. And Jongen must be kicking himself because he knows he had that podium position in the bag and just the speed in the pit lane. It's just one of those things where if you're a driver who keeps returning to garage through practice and through qualifying, maybe you're thinking, do I need to do a bit more practice on my pit entry? Because, he might have only been 0.2 of a second quicker than Hearn and Rooney. But he lost all that time having to serve a drive-through stop-and-go 30 penalty.
Yeah, it's a real shame to see somebody's race affected by such a big penalty, but at the end of the day, it's their own doing, and it's part of the race that they have to manage. It's one of the elements that you go up against in longer races like this. There's more time for it to go right, but there's also more time for it to go wrong as well. But I think we were dealt a very good hand there in terms of that race. It was very entertaining, but despite that, there was still a minute between Seville and Hearn. An amazing performance by Jonathan Seville, and a real introduction, at least to me anyway, of just what sort of pace this guy has. He was so consistent, so tidy, knew what he was doing with his strategy. He had a very all-round performance, I'd say, for this round of the championship.
Yeah, and great traffic management as well, because obviously when you're leading the race, when you come up against lap traffic, you're the one to generally wake them up. You're the one that, so I'm being lapped now. And then when you come through, when you're in second, they're already alert and already aware that faster traffic is coming through. But Seville, handled it like a champ. And of course, I think that puts him. The SimRacing.GP tables won't update this quickly. It will take for the session to close. But I think that does put Seville in the lead of the Pro Championship. His nearest rival, Daniel Hearn, obviously came second. And they went into this race equal on points. So it'll all come down to the final round of the championship, and which round is their drop round, of course. And Rooney, very happy to get on the podium. He's had a difficult season. He's 6th in the championship, and he's had a difficult season of at Brands Hatch, round 4, he had a technical issue. He started on the second row of the grid, and then his sound dropped out during the 2-minute preparation phase. And by the time he got the problem fixed, he'd missed the 2-minute window and had to start from the back of the grid, and then got caught up in somebody else's incident. And then because he retired from the race in a bit of a rage quit, but he didn't quit the session. He just was in the pit lane for the rest of the race. He took a qualifying ban for the next race. So once again, he had to fight his way through the field. And he just got held up by Raynar Ressar and Shahabi and was never able really to progress beyond 15th place. So Rooney, for the first time in about 3 races, been able to show the speed he has, and he can get that Porsche onto the podium. So that will give him invaluable points and could see him get up into 4th position in the championship.
Yeah, that's it. You have to think bigger picture, don't you, all the way through a season like this. You know, there may not be many rounds, and you may be able to see each round as a very easy place to sort of fall by the wayside or, you know, make a mistake. And, I mean, you could look at it positively as well and see it as a chance to gain points and have a really good time of it. And, you know, you need to make the most of each round when there's not many of them. But still, the drivers have to think about the points on offer and sometimes just back out of a situation, just pick your fights, know where you need to push and where you don't. And it's been good to see certain drivers managing that tonight, but it's also exciting to watch the drivers that don't always heed their own sort of warnings that should be going on in their heads. You know, it's a great different mix of driving ability and, of course, driver mentality in the championship. I've really enjoyed it tonight. It's been really good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're grateful to have you here. And, you know, we probably only got you for this weekend, but there's only 1 round of the championship left. I hope everyone watching can join us. We're not on Twitch anymore, of course. We're streaming from YouTube. That message probably didn't get through to everybody. Usually we get about 30 people watching, and I don't think, you know, I think a few people might have just gone to Twitch and figured we weren't broadcasting and didn't know we were on YouTube. So hopefully next week, when we race at the final round of the championship in Monza, Italy, we'll have a few more of you watching, and whether you join us again, Chaz, or just join us watching, you know, thank you for joining us this evening. Great to have you, and
my pleasure.
For me, great to work alongside, you know, a professional, whereas I just do this for the laurels basically, and to help out Johnny and oNiD and Dan and everyone. And you know, of course, it means I get a bit of free advertisement as well with oNiD, being able to promote my little my artwork and my graphic design with go for the gap graphics and everything.
For sure. Well, it's just good fun to jump in the commentary box again. Like I say, it's always exciting to learn a new series and see a different set of drivers. And like I said before, it's a clean slate for me, not knowing who to expect to be fastest, who to expect to make mistakes, or potentially be a little bit more sendy than everybody else. But it's been good fun tonight, and it's been a really strong way to round out my weekend. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Those of you who were able to join us. Thank you, Dan, cameraman and race director on the cameras and everything. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chaz, for joining us. And I've been Cammy Sturge. Thank you for joining us. And we'll hope to see you next week for the championship final at Monza. Have a lovely Sunday and enjoy your week.